Call to order the regular city council meeting for April 27th, 2021. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Council members Aquino.
Here.
Chalem Cherla.
Here.
Howell.
Here.
Rodriguez.
Here.
And Kozlowski.
Here. Everybody please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, is there any agenda updates?
You have one agenda update this evening. It is item number 13. Amendments have been provided to the council and are available to the public at the back table.
Okay, very good. All right, first up is business from the floor. This is an opportunity for people to speak on topics that are not already on tonight's agenda. So if the clerk will call our first comments, and if you have not yet submitted a blue comment card and would like to talk on some topic that's not on the agenda, please deliver it to our police officer up front and he'll pass it along to us. Thank you.
Okay, your first speaker this evening will be John Sutherland, and John will be followed by Brandon Mansour. You can come on down to the podium,
come on
sir.
down. Yeah, and just this small microphone right here.
Right here? That's
Yeah.
a little intimidating, isn't it? Okay. All right, well, good evening. My name is John Sutherland. I had just a quick, I know it's not on the agenda, but recently was notified of a possible property development on 103 East Natoma. It's right across from the prison entrance. I just hope the council keeps it in their mind to hopefully not develop this land. It's full of old growth oak trees, and I know we're running out of those that are right along the bike path. It runs right along Johnny Cash Trail. It's about 12 to 15 beautiful old growth oak trees, and it seems to be a difficult property to develop anyways, just with access points. So I'd love the council to keep in mind, see how we can keep that a wilderness area. It's a beautiful place, and it'd be sad to see it developed. That's all I have.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next speaker will be Brandon Mansour, and Brandon will be followed by Patrick Thibault.
Evening, council. Just real quickly, myself, Vice President Brandon Mansour with the Police Officers Association. I'm actually going to yield my time over to Jacob Verhalen, our president. He has something he'd like to address as well. Probably speak for Jared Perez and Patrick Thibault for their time as well to be yielded to Jacob. Thank you.
Okay. So who is going to speak then?
Just Jake.
Come on down.
Just bear with me for one moment, if you don't mind. In 2007, a deputy from a sheriff's office in the foothills made the difficult decision to lateral from his home agency to the Folsom Police Department. I say difficult because everything he knew was in that county: family, friends, colleagues, and community. He could have chosen any of a dozen or more agencies in the Sacramento region, but selected the Folsom Police Department because they were considered the premier law enforcement agency at that time. Pay and benefits were exceptional, and after only one ride-along, he was sold. Several months later, he donned the uniform of the Folsom Police Department. He brought with him 9 years of law enforcement experience, including SWAT, field training officer, firearms training, detectives, corporal, and sergeant. Nearly a decade of training paid for by another agency had now become the exclusive benefit of the Folsom Police Department in this community. Like him, he quickly realized that most of the officers at the Folsom Police Department were also laterals, many of which with an enormous wealth of knowledge, talent, and experience from their home agencies. That officer was me. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Madam Vice Mayor, members of the council. My name is Jake Verhalen, and I'm the president of the Folsom Police Officers Association. This evening's purpose for sharing my story is to provide context for what I'm about to say. While we once were an agency dominated by experienced lateral officers amassed from of various agencies throughout California, hope you don't mind, I feel like I'm suffocating, that no longer holds true today. Traditionally, officers only left our agency when they reached retirement age. Now they're leaving in droves, lateraling to other agencies and taking with them valuable training and experience, some of which paid for by the city of Folsom. Last year saw our first lateral officer leave Folsom PD in more years than I can remember. 2 months ago, we saw the second, and we currently have 5 more in the hiring process with other agencies, 2 of whom have already accepted conditional job offers. This only accounts for the officers leaving that I'm aware of, and I suspect there's probably more to come. Of the last 16 police officers we've hired, only 2 were laterals. The remaining 14 were pre-service, meaning they have no prior law enforcement experience. Of those 14 pre-service, 4 failed our training program and were released from employment. And of those 2 lateral officers I mentioned, one of them just accepted a conditional job offer from an agency in our region after serving with the city of Folsom for merely 2 years. This doesn't even account for the police recruit we fired during the first month of the police academy for excessive tardiness, failed exams, and failure to report his conduct to his supervisor. A recruit whose academy tuition and salary were paid for by the city of Folsom. Suppose we continue the struggle to hire and retain quality, experienced lateral officers with Folsom PD over the next 5 years. In that case, the police department will find itself bereft of suitable officer candidates to promote into leadership and supervisory roles. This means the potential for corporals and even sergeants with 5 years experience or fewer supervising even less experienced officers on the streets. As you can see, we are on the precipice of becoming a training ground for police officers. On January 28th of this year, Mayor Mike Kozlowski delivered his State of the City address. During this address, he identified specific priorities in no uncertain terms. Quote, "Now turning to the city's activities this year, our highest priority and responsibility is to protect the community's health and safety. In times like this, that mission is crystal clear," end quote. Mayor Kozlowski later goes on to say, quote, "After the year we just experienced, we are ever more aware of the power and unpredictability of disasters, underscoring the importance of public safety and preparedness. When a disaster strikes, it is local government on the front lines," end quote. During 2020, and amidst one of the most critical stages of the COVID-19 pandemic, City Manager Anderson appropriately called for all non-essential city employees to telecommute or work from home. All city departments were told to designate essential versus non-essential employees. Of the over 100 employees working at the police department, there was only one person deemed non-essential. The very nature of their job descriptions and the services provided by the remaining estimated 99 employees was decidedly essential. Not because I say so, because the city manager said so. During his State of the City address, Mayor Kozlowski praised the Folsom Fire Department for their noble efforts during 2020, and most deservedly, I might add. Quote, "The fire department responded to more than 8,400 incidents, provided life-saving mutual aid to jurisdictions battling wildfire blazes, and added 2 new wildland fire engines, and refurbished a 3rd to ensure our community is prepared," end quote. Juxtapose his statement about the fire department with the mayor's statement about the police department in this next part of his address. Quote, "The Folsom Police Department continues to provide professional and reliable services to those in need and continues to be a model for police organizations in California," end quote. Nothing about the number of nothing about the number of calls that the police department responded to in 2020. It was over 40,000. No mention of the police department's enhanced traffic enforcement resulting in a year utterly devoid of a single traffic-related fatality in 2020. An achievement worthy of praise considering that 2019 alone saw 13 vehicle-related fatalities in the city of Folsom. And no mention of the mutual aid support from Folsom police officers provided to jurisdictions battling wildfires in the form of evacuations and extra patrols in the communities to prevent looting. While parks, trails, and other recreational locations are a valuable attraction and part of what makes Folsom so unique, these amenities are worthless if people feel that they are unsafe to use them. Fortunately, our parks and trails are exceptionally safe because of the 24/7, 365 relentless pursuit of criminal behavior by the Folsom Police Department. Folsom doesn't just need police officers to staff for vacant positions from retirements and laterals to other agencies. Folsom needs the very best and brightest police officers available. We need experienced laterals. We need mature individuals who possess the life experience and the ability to remain calm, cool, and collected under pressure. We need officers with a temperament to make rational, split-second decisions during critical incidents that have the potential consequences of life or death. And yes, we also need to hire pre-service officers that we can groom and bring up within our organization as well. In the aftermath of the economic depression of 2008, members of this council and several of your predecessors established a rainy day fund to stave off disaster during economic downturns and other unexpected crises. I'm here tonight to tell you that there is a crisis upon us, and it is raining in Folsom at the police department. It is raining lateral police officers from the salary B range, pursuing better pay and benefits with other agencies in our region. It is raining talent. It is raining competent, mature police officers. It is raining experience. As you discuss this preliminary budget, including the $15.3 million federal dollars that Folsom will receive this year from the CARES Act, I ask the City Council members to consider this simple question tonight and in future budget discussions. How important is public safety to you? And perhaps more importantly, the community that you represent. Folsom's motto is distinctive by nature. In conclusion, I want to ask the council and the mayor, what does that motto mean to you? When I came to work at the Folsom Police Department over 13 years ago, that motto absolutely rang true. Folsom was separate and distinguished among all other cities and counties in our region with incredibly appealing qualities. Folsom's character and how strongly its city officials valued public safety back then was precisely what attracted me and so many other experienced lateral officers to this city in the first place. As I've shared with you this evening, however, we've lost that distinction. As the city manager and city council collaborate to reach a balanced budget, please consider the information I've shared with you tonight. Remember that the Folsom Police Officers Association will begin negotiations of their next contract beginning at fall of this year. Please appreciate the role that the police department plays in the health and safety of our city. And above all else, please do not allow the Folsom Police Department to become a training ground with a revolving door of police officers leaving. Thank you sincerely for your time.
Thank you, Officer Verhalen. Okay, do we have others?
You have no further business from the floor this evening.
All right. Scheduled presentations?
So next is scheduled presentations. Your first item this evening is a proclamation of the mayor of the city of Folsom proclaiming May 9th through the 15th as National Police Officers Memorial Week in the city of Folsom. Chief Hillman will be accepting.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is a proclamation that the chief is holding now that's of the mayor of the city of Folsom proclaiming May 9th through 15th of 2021 as National Police Officers Memorial Week in the city of Folsom. Whereas the National Police Week was established in 1962 by President John F. Kennedy, along with a joint resolution of Congress to pay special tribute to those law enforcement officers who have lost their lives in the line of duty for the safety and protection of others. And whereas there are approximately 900,000 law enforcement officers serving in communities across the United States, including 79 sworn members of the City of Folsom Police Department who work devotedly and selflessly on behalf of the citizens of the City of Folsom, regardless of the peril or hazard to themselves. And whereas since the first recorded death in 1791, more than 22,000 law enforcement officers in the United States have made the ultimate sacrifice. And whereas the names of 22,217 of these dedicated public servants are engraved on the walls of the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial, which was dedicated in 1991 in Washington, D.C., and whereas 307 new names of fallen heroes were added to the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial last spring, including 135 officers killed in 2020 and 172 officers who had died in previous years whose stories of sacrifice had been lost to history until now. And whereas the service and sacrifice of all officers killed in the line of duty will be honored, and the names of the officers newly engraved on the memorial will be formally dedicated during the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund's annual Candlelight Vigil to be held on the evening of Thursday, May 13th, 2021. And whereas May 15th, 2021 is designated as Peace Officers Memorial Day in honor of all of the fallen officers and their families. Now, therefore, I, Michael D. Kozlowski, Mayor of the City of Folsom, on behalf of the Folsom City Council, do hereby proclaim the week of May 9th through 15th, 2021, as National Police Officers Memorial Week in the City of Folsom, and publicly salute the service of law enforcement officers in our community and communities across the nation. Thus proclaimed this 27th day of April, 2021.
It's an honor to stand here and accept this on behalf of the police department. While our agency has been fortunate not to have lost an officer in the line of duty, we have lost many officers in the line of duty in our region. And we have oftentimes been there side by side with their partners, comforting them or assisting in apprehending the suspects that have committed these crimes. So this is near and dear to us all. I appreciate this, and we'll display it prominently at the police department.
Very good. All right, thank you. Okay, please call the next item.
Okay, your next item is scheduled presentation item number 2. This is a presentation of the city manager's fiscal year 21-22 proposed operating and capital budgets for the City of Folsom, the successor agency, the Folsom Public Financing Authority, and the Folsom Ranch Public Financing Authority.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. I'm Stacy Tamani, Finance Director and CFO. Tonight I'm presenting the City Manager's proposed fiscal year 2021-22 operating and capital budgets. We'll begin with a look at the projected general fund results for the remainder of fiscal year 21. Over here you have your revenues projected to come in at about $88.8 million and your expenditures at about $90 million. It's a deficit of $1.2 million projected for the end of the fiscal year. You did have about $1 million of the CARES Act reimbursement that we collected during this year. So we're projecting about a $232,000 deficit, leaving your unassigned fund balance down here in the blue at about $13.3 million or 14.7% as a percentage of expenditures. It's still below your 15% minimum, and of course still far below where we were in 18-19 at just over 20%. To minimize the use of fund balance this year, we have kept frozen positions frozen, and we've kept a very close watch on our expenditures. So this is just a brief look of where we expect the general fund to end up at the end of this fiscal year, and gives you the framework for where our starting point was as we began to prepare the fiscal year 21-22 budget proposal that you have before you. So now we'll move into the proposed budget. On this slide here, we have fiscal year 18-19 through our proposed fiscal year 21-22. The total proposed appropriations for the general fund for fiscal year 21-22 is $92.5 million. It's about a $3 million increase over the 2021 budget, or about 3.3%. Revenues are estimated to increase by that same 2.9 million over the prior year, so that was the amount that the city manager had to allocate across all departments. We've continued many of our saving strategies that were incorporated in the prior year in order to keep expenses down. That's continuing to keep frozen positions frozen. We still have those reduced temporary employee budgets, and we were also unable to give any across-the-board increases for operations and maintenance for departments. The 2.3% decrease that was implemented last year is still in place, except for very specific increases for a few proposed items. And as an additional savings strategy, we also plan to prepay the CalPERS payment this year and use that savings for some one-time costs. Looking a little closer at this schedule here, you'll see that the figures do include the proposed budget additions, and I'll go over those in the next slide. As you can imagine, the Budget Committee received many requests from department heads, all very legitimate needs, and we could not accommodate every request with just that small amount of increased revenue. All the program expenditure enhancements that we have proposed were based on priorities, mandates, and needs. I'll go through each category here and then go into a little more detail about what is included. Starting on the top line, we have a salary and benefit increase of about $1 million. We went from the $66.7 million last year to about $67.7 million this year. As I mentioned earlier, we have continued with that hiring freeze that will continue through fiscal year 22 for the most part. And that means that all vacant, non-critical positions will remain vacant, and that allows us to realize salary and benefit savings related to those positions not being filled. So that helps with the increase there between last year and this year. To keep benefit costs down, we implemented a combination of using the risk management internal service fund again. We plan to use about $670,000 this year, and also we'll have that savings from prepaying the PERS amount. But even still, our salary and benefit costs did use about $1 million of our total $3 million that the city manager had to allocate across all of the departments. Though an in budget on your next line went from $19 million to about $22 million, a $3 million change. That's where you'll see most of the new additions this year in the budget. And I'll go over that high-level summary in the next slide. Capital outlay here is down about $1 million, and that's mostly related to the Aquatic Center pool renovation project. That was in this $2.9 million number here for last year. So that, of course, has come out, and then it was offset with a few smaller, lower dollar projects that brought it back up to about the $2 million level this year. Debt service on the last line is budgeted to come down by about $111,000. No new debt has been added, and that decrease is due to the SACOG loan for a trail project that's been paid off. And that loan program was available to the city so that we could accelerate the delivery of the project, but now it has been completely paid. So again, the total proposed appropriation is $92.5 million for the general fund. So what is proposed in this budget? We have the addition of the battalion chief position. It's about a cost of $314,000. For $125,000, the roof repair for Fire Station 36. We have a $225,000 for the Folsom Plan Area Fire Station, the preliminary design. We have $660,000 for 2 ambulances. An additional $495,000 set aside for the purchase of a Type 1 fire engine. It's a set aside this year, and then plan to fund the rest in the next fiscal year. We have $325,000 for a street sweeper for Public Works. $257,000 for the first year of a 5-year contract for police body-worn cameras, and that will be the same cost every year for 5 years. $231,000 for police radio encryption upgrade. We have $170,000 for ladder fuel reduction program. An additional $150,000 for building renovation for 405 Natoma Station. We have $80,000 for the replacement of a boiler in City Hall that needs to be replaced. $55,000 for painting of the exterior of the parking garage. We have $40,000 for the police cadet program. An additional $40,000 for some mandated zoo upgrades that were part of the USDA audit that we received. $35,000 for community center upgrades. That's for things such as curtains and countertops so that it'll be ready for when it opens back up. And then $25,000 for additional homelessness support above and beyond what we are already doing. This next slide displays the general fund proposed appropriations sorted by department. So all of those additions, you're now seeing them in each of these departments. Starting with the fire department, they're up 1.4 million over last year. That's mostly due to the replenishment of their capital funds so that we could purchase the ambulances and set aside for that fire truck. It also includes the addition of the new battalion chief, and then just your regular additions to salary and benefits per the labor agreements. Police is up about 700,000 for the additions that were on that last slide, and also the labor agreements for salary and benefits. Community development, you're seeing it slightly down here, and that's because they had a $300,000 grant in this number here, in this 5.7 million. So that is not included in this one. So overall, they had about a $200,000 increase, and that is mostly for just the staff increases, just the salary and benefit increases, not extra staff. Public Works is up for the street sweeper, the purchase of a few additional vehicles, and for their staff costs. General government is up from 10.5 to about 10.8 million. That includes the painting of the parking garage and the replacement boiler. Culture and recreation, you're seeing this large decrease here from 15.4 million down to 14.3. That's because the pool renovation was in that 15.4 million. So overall, they're up about 600,000. That includes the increases that we saw on the previous slide, and then also their salary and benefit increases. Debt service is down due to the repayment of that SACOG loan. And then this other line item here, up by $1 million. This is, in the last year, we had the 4.9 million. This year, 5.9 million. And it's related to the transfer from the general fund to the risk management fund. This is where we had savings last year by not transferring the full amount to risk management. So we're planning to put it back up, not to the full level that we've had in prior years, but up by $1 million. Here you'll see the pie chart detailing out this appropriation by department. And as you can see, I've left the colors the same for both years, so you can see that the pieces of the pie are very similar. We continue to propose a budget that maintains that balance of expenditures by function. Fire's at 24%, police at 27%, community development at 6%, public works at 9%, general government at 12%, culture and rec at 15%, and then you have your debt service and other. Here you have your chart of authorized positions. As I mentioned, there was just one position that we are proposing in this budget in the general fund, and so you see that here. And then on this schedule, you also have the addition for positions in solid waste. There were the ones for the organics that you already approved in an earlier meeting, and then we have a proposal for additional solid waste drivers. We did have a few adjustments for some positions where it was partially funded by enterprise and general fund, so that's why you're seeing a little extra here, but it's no addition of positions, just a changing of the funding. So we're just proposing the one additional position here for the general fund this year. So next we'll take a look at the other side, here at the revenues. This slide is a summary of revenues for the past 4 years, and then the proposed figures for fiscal year 21-22. We are projecting total revenue, including those from transfers in from other sources, to be at 92.5 million. On this first blue line, this is where you can see more of where we're at compared to the prior years. Revenues from these sources here are proposed to be at 84.1 million, and at our high point, we were at 84.9 million. So still quite a ways from that 18-19 revenue. Starting up at the top, property taxes are expected to remain stable at this point and increase over the year by about 2.6 million. And we continue to see that steady trend, and we project that that will continue. Sales tax is estimated to come in about $1 million over last year. We project that we will not see a full recovery in sales tax until about the last quarter of next year. So that'll be April through June of 22. And then you won't see full recovery of sales tax back to pre-pandemic levels until the full fiscal year 22-23. And recovery really depends on consumer patterns over the next year. In conversations with our sales tax consultants, there's still this risk of lower growth as consumers spend their money on some pent-up demand for services and experiences they haven't been able to do in the last year, and those are not taxed. So it's really going to be dependent on what patterns the consumers settle into in the future. And that's a similar story for the next line there, the transient occupancy tax from our hotels, still based on what consumers decide to do, if business travelers come back or if they're happy with their Zoom meetings. We are projecting that it will go up to $2 million over our $1 million projection this year, but still short of our high point of $2.4 million. The next revenue category here, charges for services. We have a projection for fiscal year 21-22 of about $10 million. The category is down from our projection for the end of fiscal year 2021, and I'll just go through a couple reasons for that. We have reimbursements from the Office of Emergency Services for our fire personnel when they're out on strike teams. So that is in this number. It's about $1 million. We also have some increased development engineering fees. When those fees, revenues go up, so do our expenses. So we've taken both of those out, and what we've done is pretty much have a flat revenue projection for fiscal year 21-22. Mostly this relates to our Parks and Recreation revenues. It's a conservative projection, but what we wanted to do was give the council the ability to ramp up as needed for those programs. We didn't want to be in a situation of overestimating the revenues and then having to cut back if they weren't meeting our expectations. So our hope for that line item is that charges for services will begin to exceed our estimates, and then we'll be back in front of the council for additional appropriations for those programs if it's appropriate. Here's the same information just put into chart form. You can see the trends for these major revenue sources. Property tax is at the top, it's the blue line, and it's just consistently moving upward at the pace that we've seen over the past few years. Sales tax is in the dark orange. We saw that big dive in fiscal year 20, and then we're seeing the recovery in 21, an additional recovery in 22, but still below the level that we were for fiscal year 19. Charges for services is the gray line in the middle. We see that heading down for fiscal year 20. Without the one-time revenues that I just spoke about in the last slide, we would have been down at that $10 million mark, and so that's what we're proposing for the next year as well. And then you have your transfers in and your intergovernmental with the blue and yellow lines just fairly flat there at the bottom. Here's a chart showing your unassigned fund balance by year with the blue columns. And then you have your unassigned fund balance as a percentage of expenditures displayed by the tan line. Again, we hit that high point there in fiscal year 19 at just over 20% as a percentage of expenditures. And we're projecting to be down at the 14.35% through the end of fiscal year 22. Moving on to the enterprise fund budgets, we'll go over the projected revenues and proposed appropriations for water, wastewater, and solid waste funds. The proposed budget for the water enterprise fund includes $17.6 million of program revenues. And that's about even with fiscal year 2021's projection, a slight increase just due to some new accounts coming on. And then you have your proposed appropriation at about $15.3 million for operations, and then an addition of $7.7 million for capital expenses, and that will leave this fund with working capital of about $14.9 million. The proposed budget for wastewater is $8.5 million of proposed revenues, and that's about even again with last year's results. And then you have your proposed appropriation of $5.9 million for operations, an additional $3.8 for capital expenses. And that will leave this fund's working capital at about $15.9 million. For the solid waste enterprise fund, this year's budget includes $16 million for program revenues. It's about a 25% increase over fiscal year 2021's projected year-end revenue. It's mostly due to the additional rate increase that will come into effect on July 1st, and then also the projection for increased revenues from the additional homes that are being built. Proposed appropriations are at $15.3 million, and then additional capital expenses at $2.9 million for vehicle replacements. That will leave the fund with a projected working capital of under $1 million, coming in at about $772,000. Here you have your appropriations by fund in total. This is for all city funds. The budget includes for the general fund the $92.5 million, for enterprise funds $50.3 million, special revenue funds at $12.4 million, debt service funds at $11.7 million, your capital project funds at just under $12 million, internal service funds at $21.4 million, and your fiduciary funds at just under $20 million, for a total appropriation of about $220 million. And just a reminder that when you do approve the final budget, this is what you are actually approving, is the total appropriation by fund type. Next up is a look at the proposed capital improvement plan budget for fiscal year 21-22. That was also included in the document that you received tonight. Here's just a look at some of the major projects. I didn't put everything on here. The first column is what is new in this budget, either a new project or an addition to the total project budget. And then the right column is the total project budget for these active projects. So I'm just going to go over quickly the new ones here, or the additions. You have your sewer evaluation and capacity assurance plan, an addition of $377,000. You have the Folsom Plan Area Neighborhood Park number 3 at $4.7 million. That was an addition to the project for a total project budget now of $5.2 million. Natoma Alley Rehab and Replacement, an addition of $121,000 for a total budget of $3.1 million. You have Basin 4 Sewer Phase 2 project. This is new this year, $2.3 million. You have the annual street overlay and pavement management project at $2 million. We have an addition to the Folsom Plan Area Trails of $300,000 for a total project budget of $920,000. We have Ed Mitchell Park, $271,000, and then the Folsom Plan Area Fire Station design for $225,000.
What are we doing at Ed Mitchell Park?
Can I have Lorraine come up? Okay.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Council, Lorraine Paggioni, Parks and Rec Director. That $270,000 is actually, we're using the Prop 68 grant funding, so we'll eventually be reimbursed for that. It'll finish out the Ed Mitchell Park. We're restoring bathrooms, benches, the signage. I think monument signage hasn't been installed there yet. So we're going to check the box off on completing the Ed Mitchell Park.
There actually is a monument sign there.
Yeah, I think there was, is there? Yeah.
Yeah.
There's that entry sign, but I think there was a dedication sign that hadn't been put in yet. But
Well, that's about 25 years overdue.
see, we're going to finish it. Does that help?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so then this chart just takes those current projects and shows the funding sources for them. For enterprise funds, for wastewater and water, it's being funded by the enterprise funds. We have loans and grants of $326,000. We have impact fees of $6.4 million, and then other funding sources such as Measure A, gas tax, or the general fund at $3.8 million. Now we're just moving on to the final section of the budget presentation. It's the 5-year budget forecast. And looking forward, we still have a lot of uncertainty related to our sales tax, our TOT, and our other program revenues. We are seeing recovery in some of those areas, but our assumptions rely on there being no resurgence of the virus, no variants that would impact the economy again. We're predicting that home prices would remain stable in the upcoming year and projecting building permits to continue at the levels that we've seen over the past year. We also have a few budget pressures to consider in the upcoming years. The first being CalPERS increases. The changes in the actuarial assumptions affect our required contributions. In addition, the CalPERS investment performance has been very mixed in past years. If they come up short, then our employer contributions are required to make up the difference. So when the investment returns decline, our employer contributions go up. And this has meant in the past about $1 million increases or more to the general fund. So this trend is likely to continue at a rate similar to that. The second issue here is a building of a capital replacement fund. There's a need for a plan for some type of capital replacement fund. This would be for both current and future needs for all of our various city-owned facilities. We have many renovations and repairs. You've heard of a lot of roof repairs, HVAC systems that are aging, as well as other things such as another pool resurfacing that'll be here before we know it, with really no dedicated funding source there. We also just need to be, for us to be able to balance the budget in the future, it relies heavily on having a full recovery of our sales tax and TOT up to pre-pandemic levels. So we'll need to be closely watching that trend. We need to be considering ways to increase our non-tax revenue growth as well. And then the final point here is that we need to be looking for a plan for funding staff for the upcoming Folsom Plan Area Fire Station, which means we'll need to be building that capacity into the next 2 to 3 budgets. It's about a $900,000 addition to the budget all at once is what will be happening. So we took a close look at that this year, making sure that we have some one-time purchases that we're doing that could then be set aside as capacity in the next budget. It's possibly like $300,000 each year so that we're ready for that $900,000. But that's just one example of things that are coming in the future that we need to be planning for. Here's a graphical display of our 5-year projection. We have fiscal year 22 at that 92.5 million, which we've seen in all the previous slides. For non-tax revenue, we're projecting growth of about 5.5 million in the next year. That would be for continued recovery in our retail sectors and just general growth overall for property tax. And then we would see increases of about 4.5% in the following years. For non-tax revenue, we would intend to see or hope to see a 5.5% increase in the next year, and that would be with the expectation that all our programs are back up and running at full capacity. And then we would have 2.5% increases in the following years. And so what that gets us is a revenue increase of about 3.5% for each year over the next 5 years. And then what I have down here are expenditures growing at different rates. Expenditures at 3.5%, 4.5%, 4, or 4.5%. And so for revenues, that increase at 3.5% is an increase of about 18.9 million over that 5-year time period. And for expenses, it would range from 17.4 million to 22.8 million, depending on what percentage increase we were at. And so if you look at that graphically here, our projected revenues are the blue columns. And if we keep our expenditures at 3.5%, it is below our revenue level, and that's where we would want to be. If expenditures start to get up to a 4% increase each year, we are fairly close, kind of breaking even for fiscal year 23-24, but then we have an operating deficit starting in fiscal year 25. And the extreme case here, if expenditures were to increase at 4.5%, even next year we don't make it within our projected revenues.
What roughly is the delta in 2027 in dollars? Is it something less than?
So here, about 4 million.
Okay, gotcha, thank you.
And the reason I think this is important to look at is this year we had a 3.3% increase in revenues, and it felt like we had very little to allocate across all departments, and that's what we're looking at for the upcoming years. Just some additional comments here. In the orange, revenue enhancement options are limited and really dependent on the economy, which we've seen firsthand this last year and a half. So we have to be controlling our budget on the expense side. The gray box here, non-tax revenue must be continuously monitored and addressed, which means we need to be monitoring those revenues and related programs and then adjusting expenditures for those programs and services accordingly if the revenues just aren't coming in. The yellow box, sustainability depends on managing staff costs. We are a service organization and staff costs are our biggest expense. So managing our staffing levels and the agreements we have with the bargaining units for compensation is how we maintain our sustainability. And then the blue box here, limited financial options for growth and capital investments and general levels of maintenance. This is an issue because our budget is constrained because of these other 3 comments, and so it leaves us with very little to set aside each year for capital replacement projects, such as the facility improvements that I mentioned, and then also those future staffing needs. So in summary, the goal this year was to prepare a structurally sound budget that gives us the flexibility to ramp up as more and more restrictions are lifted. The budget as presented right now is balanced with a continued implementation of expenditure reductions and still using one-time resources to make that happen. It maintains the balance of expenditures by department. It does not draw on the city's unassigned unreserved fund balance. And lastly, and very importantly, despite continued challenges, that we still believe that it accomplishes many of the top priorities. As far as next steps, this was the presentation of the proposed budget. And so your first chance to adopt the budget will be your next meeting, May 11th, at that first public hearing. So thank you, and with that, I will conclude my presentation.
Thank you very much.
One comment. If we could continue to remind people through the newsletter on the website that it's important that to the extent people can, that they shop at retailers that are physically located within the city of Folsom, as opposed to the Amazon culture that has been created in the last year, because none of that sales tax stays here.
Well, at one of the meetings we had before, we talked about if people knew the impact of what it would have shopping local at stores where the sales tax has an impact to your community. And I think we talked about that a few months ago. Something went out.
Yeah,
But,
we've
but
done,
continue to send that message to show them that we are so dependent on those sales taxes to be able to support the programs that we have.
Absolutely. Thank you, Councilmember Howell, Councilmember Rodriguez. We've done a number of campaigns from the beginning of the pandemic, pushing the need to shop local, and it is quite compelling, the difference it makes when people choose to shop online. So, in an adverse way.
It might be easier, but it's going to mean that, the park in your neighborhood is not going to be as nice as you'd like it to be, and any number of other bad outcomes from people choosing convenience because it shows up at their front door rather than actually going to the store and purchasing something.
That's right. We will continue to push that message very strongly.
Very good. Madam Vice Mayor, any commentary or questions?
Of course. Thank you, Stacy. Couple things. So I think at one point we either reduced or suspended the amount we were putting into the Retiree Health Trust Fund. Have we restored that?
Yes, it'll be at $500,000 this year.
Okay. And how much savings will we achieve this year by paying the PERS unfunded liability payment annually rather than monthly installments?
It's about $450,000 one-time savings.
So I understand that we're kind of in unusual times right now, but I just want to reiterate, my preference is to do that, but to take that savings every year and put it into a trust fund for PERS rather than other items. And then what accounts for the large increase in operating expenses for the water and wastewater funds?
Let me go back to those slides. So typically, this is the projected number in the middle here, and then this is the proposed number. Typically, the budget, if you were comparing budget to budget, it would be about this same level. They have a lot of contract capacity that will be budgeted in and then isn't always needed. So the projected number is lower than the proposed, but the budgets would have been very similar.
Got it, okay. And then finally, the $25,000 in homelessness support, is there something specific we're thinking that is going to, and is that intended to be a one-time thing or an ongoing expense?
It's really just, it was intended to be, to augment what we're already doing, which I had sent a report to the city council of, we're spending a lot of money in a lot of different areas and are not provided with direct support for the county to do that. There was a thought that it could be used as like a kind of a sanitation grant for those experiencing homelessness, but honestly, staff, it just looks to, your guidance as to how or if you'd like to have that in the budget.
So I guess my preference would be to not put it in this budget, but to have that conversation with the money we're going to get from the American Rescue Plan. I think maybe, a shower trailer or something has been mentioned in the past. I personally am not in favor of that. So, I would like to have further discussions before we go down that road.
We appreciated that. We just wanted to kind of honor the conversation that, had happened at the dais and include a piece or, so that you can address that.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Very good. YK, any commentary, questions?
No, thank you. You did awesome job. It's quite a bit to digest in 20 minutes. The 5-year growth you were putting, the sales tax, I'm imagining that is based on the Folsom Plan area sales tax revenue coming in. If you can go all the way to the 5-year projected general fund.
This one here?
Yeah, the first line.
The sales tax?
Yeah.
The sales tax is just projections on normal growth. Property tax is also included in the tax revenue, and yes, that does take into account growth in the plan area. They're both in that same tax revenue projected growth at the top.
Oh, that's the together
Yeah,
sales tax
and
the
transient
property
occupancy tax as well, all of our tax revenue. And so that was an average of about 4.5% year over year, which is a flattening out of sales tax and a consistent growth in our property tax.
Property tax from the mostly Folsom Plan area.
Yeah, the assessed values go up every year, which we've been fortunate to see that throughout the city, but we are seeing a greater percentage of growth coming in, of course, because of the plan area.
Plan area, good. And on the solid waste, now our reserves are only 772K. Are we in danger? on that one?
Yes. And we are right now in the process of Public Works is starting on a new rate study for that, and this has a lot to do with the requirements for organics, and I could let Public Works Director Dave Nugent come up if you have more questions about that. But yes, we've been watching that. It's been going down quickly.
So we are in danger. I mean, that's what it is. If some emergencies happen there, okay, that's good.
No, we've been talking about this for months.
Yeah.
This wasn't an emergency. This is the fact that there's no market for recyclables,
Yeah.
and that the cost is going up astronomically. That's why we've made all the changes we've made, and why we had to hire people in that department.
Agreed. We are talking as a council, though, council member Howell. It's public is listening. This is a budget season. You know, it's important. Everyone.
No, it's
listening.
very important. I'm just reminding you that we've talked about this at the last 4 or 5 council meetings.
Yeah, this does have urgency to it, and
Yeah.
we've brought it to this council many times. Yeah, it is of concern for sure.
It is. Oh, good. People are listening. I mean, this is a budget season. I want them to more times listen.
Absolutely.
You know, what challenges we have here at City Hall, and we have a one resource increase. Which department is that? Your
Let me go
positions
back.
are increasing.
Let me see which slide you're referring
Yep.
to.
There was-
The revenues or expenditures?
Oh, no, the positions, that one.
Oh, the positions.
Yes.
That's for the battalion chief there, that first
Oh,
one.
that's a battalion
Mhm,
chief.
the-
Okay,
That's the proposal for that.
got it. Well, I'll pass my summaries, you know, after going
Get a
through
little homework
this.
to do now?
Yeah, exactly, right? But thank you, though, you did awesome job.
Thank you.
A little light reading. Okay. Rosario, any other questions?
I just have one question. When it comes to charges for services, does this include situations like in 2020 when there was a fire and firefighters go out to support other cities, and then we bill for those hours? Is that, because in some instances it's overtime for firefighters, correct? And so do we bill their salary plus the overtime costs?
Yes, so we get full recovery on that. So you'll see a big increase in their overtime expenditures, but then we get that reimbursement.
Okay, thank you. That was the only question I had. Great presentation, by the way.
I'm good. Thank
Okay,
you.
excellent. I have 3 just real quick things. Could you back up to the slide that had the revenue summary near the beginning?
The very first one?
Yeah, and
This?
I just wanted to highlight and then ask the question about the one
full
that
year,
has
this one.
the non-tax revenue. Yeah, the 9.9 million or 994.
Five-year
Yeah, that was
plan.
it. That was it.
Oh, sorry.
You had it. You
This?
had it.
Okay.
So as you were talking about that, I just wanted to go back over it in case anybody missed it, because I think it's an important point that the low budgeted number there, or revenue expectation for there, is tied to the fact that we're easing into restarting a bunch of parks programs.
Correct.
And as we see that revenue go up, it will be matched with expenses for running those park programs. Is that
That's
basically
correct.
what we were all getting at? Okay, just wanted to point that out, because if that revenue rebounds, it isn't a windfall. It just means that we have hired the people, the lifeguards for the pool, and we've hired all the counselors for all the various summer programs and stuff like that, right?
Exactly, and it's our goal to, as we're able to bring
Right.
back programming to, achieve cost recovery as we kind of hopscotch along.
Right. That one's just so dramatically lower as a relation to a past year. I just wanted to point that out. So, okay. And then question about the returns that CalPERS got in 2020. Did that have any positive effect on what we have to pay CalPERS? Because they had a pretty good year. Like, the stock market went kind of cuckoo. So
Had a pretty good year. The cutoff for when they do the actuarial report was still below their 7% when they had their final cutoff.
that was convenient, because they had 12.5% return for the full year.
So that's why it fluctuates, and it's just inconsistent for us
Okay,
because of that.
that's too bad.
I don't recall a single time when that expense hasn't increased.
Yeah, no kidding.
So, but good wishful thinking.
Yeah, well, little miracles happen occasionally. Okay, I think that was it. I think I just wanted to bring those 2 things up. So very good. Thank you very much for this.
And I just wanted to thank Stacy Tamani and Terry Hemley for many long hours putting together this document. I'm very grateful for both of them and the whole finance staff, so thank you.
Yeah, it's good. It's a heavy lift and good work. Thank you.
Literally.
Literally. Okay, can you call the next item, please?
Okay, your next item is scheduled presentation item number 3, a presentation by the Parks and Recreation Commission on unfunded parks.
What? We have unfunded parks?
This is a tough one to follow here. All right, good evening, Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the council, Lorraine Pigioni, Parks and Rec Director. Tonight, the Parks and Rec Commission would like to present to you an overview of the unfunded parks within the park system, and also to discuss a little bit about renovation needs and maintenance needs. It speaks a little bit to the budget conversation that Ms. Tamani just presented. So tonight I'd like to ask our chairman for the Parks and Rec Commission, Dave Nasworth, to come up to start the presentation.
Thank you, Lorraine.
Okay, good evening, Mr. Mayor, Madam Vice Mayor, and members of council. My name is Dave Nasworth. I am the chair of the Folsom Parks and Recreation Commission. First of all, before we get started, I want to say a big thank you to my compatriots, if you will, on the commission, Commissioner Matt Hedges and Commissioner Will Kempton, who are here in the audience tonight, and who I indebted to them for their leadership on this issue. I also want to thank you to Director Pigioni and her staff for all the work that they did to counsel us on this issue, if you will, and in the preparation of the materials you're about to see tonight. I want to spend just a few minutes framing the problem statement, if you will, and I will, after I'm done, I'll turn it over to Commissioner Hedges to go through some of the details. The North of 50 master plan, and this is more of a North of 50 conversation tonight, less so about South of 50. It arguably represents a commitment to the community. It is a plan, it is a public document, it is what we said we're going to do over time to Folsom residents, homeowners, prospective homeowners, that kind of thing. As of right now, Folsom has 19 parks on that master plan that are either not started or unfinished, okay? And these are our park sites that, and by on top of that, there are also additional capital improvement projects that have been started over time. But many of these sites were dedicated to the city in the 90s, if not before. Okay, so this is a long-standing issue. Approximately 1/3 of these sites are deemed not usable in their current condition. Okay, they're just swaths of land that are either they can't even be used as a passive park. That's due to a lack of phased or full construction, or programming for the sites. These planned future parks currently have no material path to funding, either for a phased or full construction or ongoing maintenance and renovation. These unmaintained sites can deteriorate over time, which can cause a decline in property values and an increase in development costs. We took a look at the numbers, and it turns out that the cost it would take to complete these parks has almost doubled in the last 5 years. Okay, so we essentially have a balance problem.
If it's doubled in the last 5 years, can you imagine how much it's gone up since the giant long wish list was put together?
I do not have those numbers, but it's probably a very large number.
Substantial,
Yeah,
yes.
and the key is that it keeps on getting bigger the longer we wait, right? So we essentially are faced with a balance problem, okay? We have commitments that we've made, okay, and we have our ability to deliver. And we have to look at both sides of the equation. There potentially could be some areas that we want to scale back, and we also have to look at additional revenue opportunities. But the path that we're on right now, we have no path to reach balance. And that's the fundamental problem as we see it on the commission. And our job as we see it on the commission is to bring to the council the right information. Understand the size of the problem so that you can make informed decisions with the right data. So to that end, I'm going to yield my time to Commissioner Hedges, who will walk you through a lot of the data behind everything I just said. Oh, and myself and Commissioner Kempton are available to take questions along with Commissioner Hedges as you see fit.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dave. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Matt Hedges. I'm Chair of the Budget Subcommittee, and I appreciate you giving me time to speak to you again 2 weeks in a row. Let's see. Oh. So the purpose of this presentation is informational and educational, and to identify the problem. This is not intended to ask for funding in fiscal year 21-22 budget. We want to lay out the Commission's intention to develop the plan and to address the situation, and to set a backdrop for additional funding needs. And ultimately, we want to seek feedback from City Council. We're going to go into these details in just a moment, but I wanted to highlight the total here to achieve our master plan goals. That's $50,200,000, and 5 years ago, this was approximately $30 million. There's 10 not yet started parks. I'm going to quickly go through them for you. There's Sun Country Park, 1.1 million. Russell Ranch Park near Fire Station 39 at 3.3 million. Russell Ranch Park at Silverhorn, 1.2 million. Russell Ranch Park Dog Park, 1.5 million. Briggs Ranch Mini Park, 1.1 million. Legacy Park at the Johnny Cash Trail, 3.6 million. Catlin Park North, 1.7 million. Parkway number 42, 670,000. Parkway number 43, 596,000. And the Natoma Ground sluice diggings at 1.8 million. There are 9 incomplete parks at 17 million. These include Hinkle Creek, 1.3, Lou Howard, 152,000, Lemby, 365,000, the Aquatic Center, 4.8 million, Livermore, 3.3 million, Willow Hill, 1.5 million, BT Collins at 1.1 million, the Senior and Arts Center, 3.1 million, and the Sports Complex at 1.5 million. We also have the Johnny Cash Trail Experience at 2.2 million, the Dan Russell Arena at 1.5 million, and the Zoo Operations Canada areas at 9 million.
Matt, before you move on, can you go back to the previous slide? What's the 4.8 million at the Aquatic Center?
Lorraine, can you answer that for us?
Good evening, Councilmember Howell. So that is the full build out of the lazy river pool, the expansion of the outside the gated area for more recreational uses at the aquatic center. Well, I'm trying to think what else is on there. It was a full expansion. I think there was like miniature golf. It was intended, and this is part of the master plan, but
when was this put into the master plan? How many years ago?
oh boy, I know it was updated in 2015. I don't know if it got augmented then or if it was prior to that, but.
Okay, and what's the 3.1 million at the Senior and Arts Center?
That is the expansion of the outdoor recreation area, additional services for additional parking, outdoor recreation, a garden, and it seemed like there was one other thing. And we're actually just submitted for a grant for some outdoor recreational amenities. So if we get that grant through AARP, it'll nip it at that expansion.
Okay, and what's the 152 at Lou Howard?
That is the overlook.
Okay, and the sports complex?
That's the inside of the running track, so it's the mezzanine area within the sports complex.
Okay.
Hang close, Lorraine, you're up next. This is a map of the unfinished parks, and Lorraine's going to go through real quickly and kind of point out these different locations for you.
Thank you again, Commissioner Hedges. All right, and you're probably familiar with most of these. So this is Davies Park. That is indicated as unfinished, but actually that is a funded project that's almost, has just started. So it's going to complete the ball field and the parking lot off of Santa Juanita. This is the Lou Howard area. This is City Hall, so this is the Senior and Arts Center. This is BT Collins. This is both the Aquatic Center and the Lemby Trail. This is Livermore Park. This is Willow Hill. area here, and then there's a little yellow here at Kemp Park. And then the red for the undeveloped, so not yet started, parks. This is Legacy Park, where Johnny Cash Trail is. This is actually was the cover photo of this presentation, that little sliver of park off of Porto and Briggs Ranch. This is Park Site 42 and 43 in the parkway. We currently have, since we knew it was going to be passive, we've allowed some mitigation trees to be planted there. This is the Silverhorn area where there's currently mitigation trees there. This is the park near Fire Station 39. This is what would be a dog park here. This is included in the list, Benevento Park, because it was funded. It wasn't included in the list, but we know that we're also going through an analysis with Benevento to bring back to you about what to do with those funds, but we included it here on the map. This is Catlin Park North. This is part of the Sun Country Trail, so right where Glen is kind of really curvilinear here, this and the trailhead meets right off of Glen. This is intended to have a more of a parking lot area and a park trailhead area, and this is the Natoma Station.
But there are currently some parking spaces there. I saw 4 or 5 cars parked there just a couple of days ago.
Yeah, we wiggled in a few kind of not completely permanent looking, but yeah, that's to expand make it a little more formal of a trailhead. And then this is the Natoma ground sluice digging area. Is that any questions on the locations and okay.
So for our renovation master plan, it identifies over $4 million in projects to be completed. For fiscal year 2021, we've allocated $620,000 to renovation. Projects underway include replacing benches, trash cans, parking lot asphalt, tables, and scoreboards. We believe we could accommodate $300,000 to $500,000 per year for this work in the short term, but eventually we're going to need more staff support. For our ongoing maintenance needs, our current budget is about $140,000 each year to address repairing irrigation, replacing plants and trees, tree removals, and minor repairs. With our current staffing, we can handle about $140,000 worth of ongoing maintenance per year. But with the amount of repairs needed, we really need $300,000 to $400,000, which translates into additional staffing. No new permanent staff has been added in 10 years. We believe that park priorities for the unfinished and not yet started parks need to be prioritized. We believe we need to assess potential funding mechanisms and opportunities and consider public and private funding partnerships. We also believe we need to implement public outreach and education effort to our residents. Moving forward, we think there are 4 ways to tackle this issue, or some combination of the 4. First is to continue the status quo. This accomplishes some projects each year, but at our current pace, the total to fund the master plan is growing dramatically and not shrinking. And as you saw before, that's over $20 million in 5 years. Our second is to accelerate funding of the existing master plans and adequately address maintenance and renovation requirements to move forward on shrinking that gap. Third is to rescope and rephase our capital needs to decrease the amount needed. And fourth is to evaluate and secure new funding sources. Ultimately, we're interested in hearing from you on how you want us to explore these options so we can return to the City Council at a future date for a more focused discussion. Thank you, Mayor and Council. That concludes my presentation. And me, Dave, Will, and Lorraine are happy to help answer any questions you may have.
Very good, thank you. Sarah, any questions or comments?
Matt, can you go back to the slide that shows the 140,000, right there? Okay, so currently you're budgeting about $140,000 for annual ongoing maintenance type stuff. So when we add a new park, such as Economy, Broder, Benevento, the new park south of 50, that number we don't account for those adding to the inventory and having to increase the cost?
Lorraine, can you help answer that?
Thank you. Great question, Councilmember Aquino. So during the budget process, we will put together our requests of what we think is needed as these new parks come online. And so some years that budget has increased a little bit to help us with that delta. But not always. Sometimes it's just based on, the budget constraints you hear, that we hear tonight. We're not always going to get exactly what we need. So we'll take the amount we do get and just figure out how to allocate it to the highest priority. So that's how we do it. In terms of the Folsom Plan area, different funding source, so that is a little different conversation with the city manager and the finance and the CFO, but for the north of 50, we get an incremental add some of the years as we've added these parks.
So let me start with my overarching question, and then I'm going to back into it here. My question is, do we have more parks currently than we can afford to maintain? And I think it's helpful for me at least to think about this and bring it down to scale like as a household budget, right? If you're a homeowner, it is a never-ending list of projects. It's just inherent to homeownership. And so, I have a list always of things that I need to do because they're health and safety hazards. Then I have those things that right now they're fairly minor and fairly inexpensive, but if I wait, the problem grows and grows and it's going to cost me more. So I fix those next, right? And then I have the things that I would really like to do, but they're not absolutely necessary. They're more wants than needs, and so I prioritize that. And so the list of things to do is always greater than the funding available, and that's no different here. And I don't think that in and of itself is a problem. But what is a problem is when you kind of cross over to where you can no longer even afford those essential repairs. And at that point, as a homeowner, I think you have to ask yourself, is this more house than I can afford, right? And then you have to start looking at some pretty drastic options. And I'm wondering, is that where we are here? Do we have more parks than we can afford? And if the answer is yes, why in the world would we add to our inventory until we get this problem figured out? And although I understand that one of the options certainly is to increase the funding, and we could talk about a new sales tax measure, and even if we put, let's say, a 10-year sunset on it, right? And we tell the public, look, we want to wipe the slate clean, we want to take care of all these things, and we're going to do this for 10 years, and then it's going to fall off. To me, that is akin to having a lot of credit card debt, and you get this windfall, right? You get an inheritance or something, and you wipe that clean. But if your income doesn't change and your spending habits don't change, in a couple of years, you're going to be right back where you were before, and that credit card debt is going to, be out of control. And so I guess my question is, first of all, I think we need to look at the entire parks funding more holistically, and perhaps the commission has done this, and I would be interested in that information, but do our programs pay for themselves, right? Does the preschool program pay for itself? The sports complex, the aquatic center, the zoo, are all of those things self-sustaining? And if they're not, is there a way that we can work together with the staff and the commission to kind of incentivize you to get to where they are more self-sustaining? That's kind of what I'm thinking right now.
I think at least it would make sense to take a look at the programs in terms of what revenue they should generate on a percentage basis, because clearly there are some park programs that they're not going to be entirely paying for themselves. It's going to come from the general fund to pay for parts of it, because we want to have equity and opportunity for people to tap into those services. But kind of like, we're going to get a presentation from RT later on, public transportation systems inherently are subsidized, but the extent to which they're subsidized can be compared across jurisdictions, and we can make good decisions about whether we're over-subsidizing or under-subsidizing certain things. So,
yeah.
So I'm agreeing with you. I just think that we may not get to where they're all paying for themselves, but we should at least be responsible what
Right.
revenue we do collect.
And so to your point, I mean, there are things to me like, if we have to, which I'm sure we are, subsidizing the aquatic center. Now, to me, as a community, that's important that we have residents who are water safe, right? And that we have kids who are taking swim lessons and stuff. That is in the best interest of our community, and I don't have a problem subsidizing that. Do I think the city of Folsom should be providing preschool classes? No, I don't. Because the public sector does that. Or sorry, the private sector does that, and the school district does that. So to me, in addition to looking at revenue sources, I really think that we need to look at the programs that we're offering, the facilities that we have, their potential for revenue, and try to incentivize the staff and the commission to think more entrepreneurially. And if you look at our conversations about 405 Natoma Station Drive, I mean, if I know parks money isn't parks money, it goes into the general fund, but if we said, hey, you can do whatever you want with that. If you want to program it, fine. But if you want to rent it, we'll let you have that money and put it towards your maintenance. You know, I mean, we need to set some benchmarks or work with them to figure out a way to look at this. That's my.
Would it be helpful if we reported back with, just a kind of a spectrum of the programs that we offer, not necessarily the ones that we, contract with vendors to provide, but those that we as the city purely offer and show what we spend on them and how much revenue we get from them, just so you have a kind of overview?
I think that would be
That'd
very
be helpful.
helpful. And
The contract ones included as well.
Okay, there's a variety of, agreements we make in terms of, revenue sharing and all kinds of stuff with those vendors, but yes, we can include that as well.
I'm only asking the question because I'm pretty certain that none of those people are providing those services without making money doing it.
Yeah.
So,
But-
they're not doing it for a subsidy.
Yeah, they're not just doing it out of the goodness of their heart necessarily.
See what those programs are, where, those are breaking even for somebody.
Yeah, we'd be happy to report back. I'll work with the Parks and Recreation Director on just providing you with a broad understanding of,
Okay.
program costs and related revenues, just so that you can see if that appears to be the right balance of priorities for you in terms of your budget.
And I'm going to carry Sarah's thought further. Sarah asked the question, do we already have too many parks than we can maintain? And this is going to be a comment that goes back to what's on the master plan. And I know we have a number of new people that are relatively new people on the Parks and Rec Commission, but I want you guys to understand that none of these parks that are on this list were promised to anyone. And over the course of the years, and Will is shaking his head yes in the back of the room, over the course of many, many years, there's been modifications to the park master plan. The park master plan is not a commitment to the community that we are going to build this, because we don't have a clue where the money's going to come from. The park master plan has always been a wish list, and then it would get reprioritized with what we think we might have money for next year or 2 years from now. Is there an area in Folsom where there's a serious lack of park space? I don't frankly think that exists anywhere in Folsom. But I want you to understand that the parks master plan was never a commitment that everything on that list was going to get built. And and maybe it's time again to take a look at what's included in the master plan, what amenities are included in each one of those parks, because we've moved in a bunch of different directions. Now everybody wants to play lacrosse or pickleball,
Cricket.
where none of that stuff was talked about even 3 years ago. So I think, maybe that's something else that I'd like to hear from the Parks Commission on, is like, okay, take another look. And again, I don't know what was planned for Caitlin Park North, but it's across the street from Caitlin Park. Is that really necessary? Or if we could, take that, whatever amenity was planned there and put it in one of the other parks, those sorts of things, and moving the bits and pieces around and making sure that we have things that are somewhat important to the community, as opposed to what somebody put on the Parks and Rec the master plan 10 years ago that may or may not still be relevant.
Yeah. YK, please weigh in.
Lorraine, I know I was on one of your Parks and Rec Commission. I know you guys were talking about survey. If you don't mind, can you elaborate on the survey you guys are planning to do? Is that for the new parks or something?
And what was that, the
The survey, you guys are, yeah.
for, we're going to be doing a survey for the park naming. Was there another survey that I mentioned?
Oh, that's why the park survey, it's not that which parks we are
No,
going
not
to,
yet, but that's, I
keeping-
mean, that's not a bad idea when we get to a point that if we're trying to, you know, get some community input, would you rather have this or this? But all of our parks, we always have public outreach processes. So for instance, the Neighborhood Park 3, that'll be a public public outreach process. But we haven't not yet put on our radar a survey about what we need. I think probably the Parks and Rec Commission and I need to do a little more work on just kind of collectively figuring out what the next steps are, and then make sure we ask the right questions to the community.
Yeah, because originally I think, Matt, you all came here to talk about more on the unfinished parks, unfinished parks, and of course maintenance came, you know, at the tail end. I agree what, you know, council, my colleagues are talking about. My only thing is I hear what you know, Council Member Howley is saying, but when the houses were selling, it is that time people are deliberately saying, here is the park coming, here is the park coming. You know, those are all being told to the community. You know, that's another thing probably we may have to take into consideration. I'm going to be surprised to see, you know, what park, you know, we can't maintain and people are not maintaining. We'll see. You guys are looking for some guidance, but I'll wait for my colleagues to talk about it. Thank you.
Great. Rosario, would you like to?
Yeah. So unfunded parks has been an issue for a long time. So maybe it's now time to look at the private sector at sponsoring some parks and putting names up that would be marketing for organizations or businesses, not just Folsom businesses, but other businesses in the region that may want to get advertising in, and where it'll be money that can come through and that can help get some of these parks completed. I just think of when, you know, you go to baseball games, you go to Oracle Park. It was once SBC Park, Monster Park. And so people will pay for the marketing. And it may be one way that we can generate revenue to help get these parks completed.
Thank you.
I think if you could jump to that last slide that had the, you know, where are we going kind of commentary, the call to action. If I could jump in here, I think that, first of all, we have an amazing Parks Department that does an enormous amount of work and takes care of a lot of terrain, okay? A lot of amenities, and does a fantastic job. What I think our concern, if I can kind of divine the air in the room, and my concern specifically is I don't want them to have to run the car without oil in it, right? I want to make sure that we buy a car that we can afford to maintain so that it runs for many, many, many years, right? So fitting, we can, you know, to Mr. Nasworth's point, we can fit the budget to the expectations, or we can try and increase the budget to meet the expectations that we have in the park master plan as it is right now. And I think, Elaine, you hit it right on the head that there's probably, I guess we've all kind of gotten to this point, but I think there's definitely a need to look at programming to make sure that, you know, we're still heading in a direction that we want to head, right? So that as we can add things, we do it judiciously, right? I think, you know, being entrepreneurial will be important going forward. I think, you know, that one idea is potentially having partners that are part of our park system in some way, shape, or form. I think that's all positive stuff. So I think taking a look at the cost and type of services we're providing, taking a look at the types of scope that are in that park master plan. So either the parks in total or the amenities within the parks. It's, you know, we have a very energetic and capable Parks Commission, and it would be good if they helped to kind of, you know, pick that apart a bit and kind of revisit the park master plan in its totality so that we set our mission to maybe a couple of different targets. A mission for status quo situation with the budget, and then a stretch goal for if we can create other funding sources, either sponsorships or different revenue sources or tax measures or what have you. But right-sizing that plan so that we have a good current goal based on current expectations, current desires, and current cost considerations. So honestly, it feels to me a little bit like this is just telling you to do what we should probably do every decade and revisit that plan in its totality.
Yeah.
Not unlike we've done with some other things recently. So,
Can I ask one
so
more
if we can
question?
scratch the status quo part off and then hit those other ones, I think we're on our way.
Can I ask one more question? So Lorraine, once something's a park, is it always a park? And the reason I ask is, I went back and looked at all my Facebook posts from when I did, I toured all of our parks. And there are a couple, specifically in Lexington Hills, mini parks, and I understand part of those are funded by landscape and lighting districts, not just by Parks and Rec Department. But some of them literally, they have no amenities, right? I mean, it's a little bit of land and a picnic table or something. And I think those are very underutilized parks. Obviously, one option is to put some amenities there, but do we have any other options when a park is kind of, it's underutilized, it's not really serving its intended purpose? Does it ever can it go back to more of a natural state where it doesn't have to be maintained? Is there any option, or once it's a park, it's always a park?
Boy, I'm sure there's probably a mechanism to kind of decommission them maybe, but and maybe that happens kind of organically. If you can't maintain something, you have to start dismantling play structures, and you take out park benches or whatever. So I suppose it could happen that way.
If I could, I mean, I'm not sure it's those parks that are really the challenge here, honestly. I mean, it's a valid point, Vice Mayor Aquino. I understand what you're saying, and I'm picturing, those parks where we take our dog to walk. They're just little slivers. I know exactly what you're talking about. There's a little monument, and it's just some grass. I mean, we certainly could put some thought into converting them more to the kind of passive landscaping and not needing the maintenance, but they're honestly not the really, they don't have the stuff that costs the money to maintain it, and they don't really take, unless I'm wrong, Ms. Pagoni, I don't think they require much staff time at all, other than, a little mow and blow.
Right.
So, but focusing on, we do have this long list, that's all prioritized of, on so many needs at so many parks.
Yeah. The tremendous expenses are maintaining the paving and replacing the park structures,
furniture and,
the
yeah,
painting,
right.
taking care of the bathrooms,
Yep.
the time bombs of replacing turf fields eventually.
It
all
just
of those
feels like
things,
it never stops, and we,
Yeah.
I mean, even the aquatic center, it feels like we just made this huge investment, and we're already talking about like, that's going to need to be replastered again. It's like, wait, what? It
Gotta buy new
just never
tires every
stops.
so
Yeah,
often, yeah.
right.
The only other comment that I'm going to make, and that has to do with the number of positions. I'm just going to remind everybody that in 2008, when the recession hit, the city of Folsom had 650 employees. How many do we have now, Elaine?
Our position count right now, Stacy, do you remember? Yeah.
4 something?
Significantly, 400 something, significantly down from that for sure. And
Yep.
we have never, I mean, a case could be made, that we don't necessarily have to just strive to go right back up to that same number. We did create efficiencies, and that's a good
Right.
thing. But you make a very compelling point. We are very, you've all heard me say it, we run very, very lean here,
Right.
in terms of staff.
And simply, the fact that we haven't increased the number of positions in the Parks Department in the last 10 years is not, to me, a compelling argument to say that we have to, just because we haven't in 10 years. We have significantly less people working in the city manager's office now than we did many years ago, when the population in the city was half of what it is now.
Right. And even less just in the last few months, actually.
Yep.
So is that adequate direction? Let's take a look at where our revenue is coming from, what programs we're doing, and then,
Yeah.
what the plan, what plan suits today rather than 5 or 10 years ago for going forward in terms of the scope of future parks
That
or
helps.
maintenance of facilities. Good, okay.
Good, thank you.
Thank you very
All
much,
right.
yeah. Thanks to everybody that helped present that. Great job. Okay, please call the next item.
Your next item is scheduled presentation item number 4. This is the Folsom Plan Area Quarterly Report.
All right. There you go.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the City Council. Pam Johns, Community Development Director. The item before you this evening is our quarterly report on development, activity, and infrastructure within the Folsom Plan area. And for the benefit of those folks paying attention, we have this report that we post to the website immediately following the meeting, and we put, more detailed building permit activity on the website as well. Might get lost as we're showing all the pretty pictures of what's happening. So we give you an update on planning activity first, which is kind of new entitlements that have come in to the department, and then I'm going to turn it over to Steve Cron, the city's engineer, to go through all of the infrastructure, site engineering, map activity, things like that that give you a summary of how we're implementing the long-range plan that this city council adopted back in 2011. And that was after many, many years of planning in the process. So this is our 20-plus year plan. And this map is the most recent one that shows entitlements that have been approved essentially by this city council over time. So you see the land use plan underneath and the mapping that has been approved, and then some of the highlights of the overall anticipated development within the plan area. And then we update this about every year with the help of the landowner and the development group to reflect activity over the previous year period. Last time we were before you, we had, I think, 9 applications that came in the last quarter of 2020. This year, we have 1 in the first quarter. So it's been light on the planning entitlement, but you will see a huge swing towards very heavy on the building permit activity. So we have 1 commercial parcel map in that was submitted in the first quarter for parcels 66 and 77, shown on the map here on the southwest corner of East Bidwell and Highway 50, Alder Creek Parkway there. We've had 3 entitlements that were acted upon by the city in the last quarter. 2 by the Planning Commission, 1 by the City Council. I will show you images of those. The Planning Commission on February 3rd approved White Rock Springs Ranch residential design review, so 81 homes by Richmond American within the White Rock Springs development area. Also, the first multifamily apartment project in the Folsom Plan area was approved, recommended by City Council and approved recommended by Planning Commission, approved by City Council in late February. So Alder Creek Apartments, and this all should look familiar to you.
The sideways aerial shot's awesome.
It really does change your perspective. Steve Cron and I look through these great drone images that we get every quarter from the owners, and it is, we want to kind of keep things in that north-south orientation for the benefit of anybody paying attention to the same images, but it really does change when you shift it. So we'll try not to do that anymore.
No, it's okay.
In the future. So 265 apartments. This is luxury apartments. These are market rate, certainly apartments. And as you know, we presented to you last time, we have other multifamily projects now in the pipeline, including 1 lower income household proposal in. Finally, the City Council approved a subdivision map for the Rockcrest subdivision, which is the northeast corner of East Bidwell and Savannah Parkway. And I'm going to have Steve come up and kind of walk through all of the updates. What you will see from these drone images is we have a lot more grading and activity happening throughout the plan area, so hopefully that'll shed some light on you. And as we've mentioned,
certainly to our newest council members, we are always happy to take council members out on the site for any update to kind of see what's going on as you're interested in seeing more activity that you want to see up close and personal. Steve?
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, council members. I'll go through the next series of slides to kind of focus on the infrastructure and the grading that's going on out there. And really to summarize the first quarter, we're seeing a lot of activity on the grading and infrastructure side. Last year, similar to last year, but this year will be, I think, a little bit more than we had last year. And how the activity is going, we'll see a lot of grading and infrastructure being built during the year. And then that'll be followed shortly thereafter with an uptick of the building permit activity once those subdivisions come online or ready for building permit issuance. So with that, with this side, this is kind of the general overview where we're seeing a lot of activity right now. And most of this infrastructure that you see here will be complete and ready for building permits in the second quarter. Toll Brothers has not yet pulled a building permit, but they will be pulling their model homes probably in the next 2 weeks in the second quarter. So we'll see that will be the 11th builder that will be actively pulling building permits in the plan area. So that's quite a number, and that will coincide with a general increase and a steady increase over this year, calendar year, for building permit issuance. So with that, we'll move on. The final map activity is a little less sparse. We've got Village 3 that will come to the council in May in this second quarter. That's the last village in Mangini Phase 1. I think that's 52 units. That's Tri-Point Homes, and that will come for final map approval in May. And we expect Russell Ranch Phase 3. I'll point that out a little bit later. That activity, we didn't put it on this chart for grading and construction because it started in the first week in April, which is the beginning of the second quarter. But that final map has been split into 2 phases, and we expect should be coming before the council maybe in the second quarter, perhaps the third quarter. And then lastly, it'll be Toll Brothers. They've got a Phase 1B and 1C map, and those 3 lots combined, or those 3 maps combined, will be just over 500 units as we move forward. And that would be added to the 2,081 we already have mapped. So that puts us over 2,500. This is our activity. We provide a monthly update on our building permit activity and occupancy. In the first quarter, we issued just over 200 permits in the first quarter. And in February, we had 96, and in March, 90. So those were what we anticipated, and we expect those numbers to continue throughout the next 2 or 3 quarters as building permit activity gets activated out there on these subdivisions that will be completed in the second quarter. These are the general areas that we have activity going on, which is just a summary of the overview we just had on the previous slide. I would like to point out the area above Russell Ranch, Phase 1. That's got started this last week, and that area in Phase 2, which is underneath the Car Trust label, that area will be start grading here in the next couple of weeks. And we expect that grading to be done in the first quarter or the second quarter of 2022. And there's a lot of Lennar Homes purchased those 2 subdivisions from the New Home Company and are actively pursuing completing those improvements. So we'll see a lot of grading and construction in those 2 subdivisions over this next couple of quarters. This is a Mangini Ranch Phase 1 neighborhoods. We put a school site in there that's coming along, and I believe that's expected to open in the fall of this year. Tri-Point Homes, the last really remaining subdivision there to pull permits in. There's a few lots left in Villages 6 and 7, which is Taylor Morrison, next to the school site, and on the other side of Mangini Parkway with Tri-Point. And Village 3 is kind of there in the middle, and we would expect to see Tri-Point continue to build homes in that subdivision as soon as the map records. And Tri-Point is down there also at the bottom. You can see some activity. That is a Creekstone. Those models are just about complete, and they're already starting production homes in Tri-Point. That's just Mangini Ranch Phase 1. And these are the models, Lennar Villages 8 and 9. That's kind of an old photo. They've been complete for over a year, and in fact, all the villages 8 and 9 is all built out, and all those houses have been sold and occupied. But the Tri-Point Homes, Creekstone, those are the models that are nearing completion. Tri-Point Homes 3 through 5, they're still active, and then Taylor Morrison 6 and 7. So those are the active communities still in Mangini Phase 1. This is Mangini Ranch Phase 2. This is a little better from the south looking north, a little easier to understand. The school site's pointed out, the fire station site, which you expect the fire station site to be ready probably in the second quarter once they complete improvements for Mangini Phase 1 and 2, which is that area that's graded there just to the north of the existing homes and surrounding that tree that's out there and remains out there. Enclave is an active builder, and well, actually, KB Homes is in Solio and Enclave, Lennar and Rockcrest, and Signature Homes in Village 7. We've got a couple photos of their models out there. But that's a good overview of what's happening in Mangini Ranch Phase 2. These are the building activity, Lennar Homes, Rockcrest. Those models are probably about a month out from being complete. Signature Homes just opened in the end of the first quarter. Solio opened this past week, so they're actively selling homes. And then the Enclave models have been open for several months, and they are building permits in the Enclave as well. This is an overview of Russell Ranch Phase 1. This has been ongoing for just about a year now. We've issued, I think, over 200 permits in this subdivision alone. And the same builders are remaining, Anthem United, Meritage, and the New Home Company. But that's a good overall view of what's out there. You can see in the south east corner an overview of the recreation center that they have for the homeowners out there as part of the Homeowners Association. And to the right, under the New Home Company Villages, you can see the beginning of the grading that's going on. This photo was taken a couple weeks ago, and you can see the activity started for grading for Phase 3, which will be ongoing over the next year. And then Phase 2 to the south will begin probably in the next couple of weeks, as I mentioned earlier.
Phase 3 is the space between Alder Creek Parkway and the freeway?
Correct.
Okay.
And there's a little area there that's Broadstone Estates. That's currently owned by Elliott Homes. So once this area is graded and completed, that makes those lots more economical to allow them to move forward without having to build all the infrastructure to serve them. They can tie into what Lennar builds with Russell Ranch Phase 3. Gotcha. So we'd expect to see some activity in that subdivision as well over the next 6 months.
The clubhouse already finished.
Pardon me?
You got the clubhouse already finished.
Yeah. It's been complete. It was complete, I think, second quarter of last year, but they couldn't open it for several months because of COVID.
Yeah, it was done before any houses.
Yeah, it was built up there. It's out of sight, out of mind. It has a great view up there. If you haven't been up there, I'd recommend you go out there and take a look at it. Mm-hmm. It's a wonderful view, even just from the parking lot. It's a beautiful area, and it's a great area that will be, and it's starting to be used actively by the residents out there finally.
Great.
So we'll move on then. These are the building activity that's going out there. One we don't have here is Village 7. Those models have been done for about a year. But this is Village 1 for the New Home Company, Anthem United's models, and Villages 8. I think Village 8 is just about complete, and they'll start building homes in Village 6, which is down below the lower elevation. And then Meritage continues to build their homes in Village 4. This is a good overview of White Rock Springs Ranch. And JMC Homes and Richmond American are the two builders out there right now. And we expect to see Lennar. I think they got their design review approval, I think it was mentioned earlier. But they're ready to get their model home permits in Villages 4 through 7, which is in the upper area there. That was just recently paved in the first quarter. They had favorable weather to pave it. And so they're nearing completion in that entire subdivision. And so White Rock Springs, as far as the infrastructure and grading is complete, they will most likely be all complete with that in the second quarter of this year. And so all those lots are ready for development. Richmond American will be building in Villages 2 and 3, which is the red arrow is pointing to. That's just about complete. And then the back is, like Abe said, was Lennar Homes will be in Villages 4 through 7. These are their model home pictures of their model homes. The JMC has just opened the past 2 weeks, and Villages 8 and 9 in Richmond has had their models open on Jackrabbit Court since last summer. And this will be the new kid on the block as far as permits are concerned, but they're moving rapidly. They just paved their model home area, which is that area that's paved. We will probably issue their sales center permit this week, and their 15 model homes will be in that area. That will probably be issued in the next 2 weeks as well. So we'll start seeing Toll Brothers go vertical. They're moving rapidly on the area to the north there that you can start see the roadways coming together. That's where they're going to build their production homes. And we expect the production homes for them to start pulling building permits for production sometime in the late second quarter, early third quarter of this year. And they have an aggressive schedule for permitting, and they've indicated that I believe that their goal is to have 50 permits a month in just that subdivision alone. So this is the home sale, which generally coincides with a number of permits issued in that quarter. I believe most of the homes before they pull the building permit are sold before they pull the building permit. And this is just kind of a summary of those areas, those sales over January, February, and March. Pretty consistent, and we would expect that trend to continue, if not increase, over the next couple of quarters. And that's it for my presentation. If you have any specific questions, I can respond to.
I have a question, but I think it might actually be for Dave Nugent, and that's the progress of the White Rock improvements. How is that going? And because I just drove through there the other day and realized that they had made a massive amount of grading work.
Yeah, it has started. They are under contract. Goodfellows is the contractor, and they did start this past couple of weeks with grading. I still think they're continuing to relocate some utilities out there. We've had some permits with AT&T and Verizon. They've got a one pole line to relocate.
There's going to be an official groundbreaking at the end of next week.
No, I realize that. I guess when's it going to be done?
That's a good question.
After we have the groundbreaking.
Are we there yet?
We're not there yet, but it's underway.
We have to have the groundbreaking
That's
first,
probably
Mike,
a question more for Dave than for me, because they're under contract.
All right, I will
with
wait
Public Works.
until we use the gold shovels to ask
No
my
problem.
other question.
But it is underway, and I think they have an aggressive schedule, and I would expect to see construction activity, weather permitting, to continue throughout the entire year, with potentially having it graded by the end of the calendar year.
They've gotten a lot done in a very short time already, so that's why I was asking. Very good.
All right.
Okay. Questions?
One question. I'm just going to ask you the question that we get from the public, Steve, and that is water is on everybody's mind because it looks like California is going to be in another drought year. If things continue the way they are with the lack of water, will that have any effect on the building schedule? I realize that these homes south of 50 are very, very water efficient compared to our homes north of 50. And then secondly, I know we've made predictions about the water usage out there. Are we on track with those predictions? I don't know where we are in terms of build out. Are we at 20% of build out, and are we using 20% of the water then?
Well, right now there's a finite amount of money, finite amount of water that they can utilize based on the phase one infrastructure that's complete. That's kind of a moving target as far as units are concerned. It's between around 2,500 units to 3,000 units is kind of what we're looking at. When we're rapidly approaching that threshold, probably in the next 2 years, there is a plan by the landowners to get the phase two infrastructure going to eliminate that constraint. And that's going to take a little bit of time. So that'll be ongoing over the next couple of years. But what the project, a lot of the water that's being utilized right now is for grading and, on a daily basis. Well, if we get to a point where we're into a stage 3 or stage 4, stage 5 water conservation, the landowners aren't able to utilize that water for construction. They're going to have to find alternative means to use that construction. If they're not using it for construction, that frees up some of that water, obviously, for future building construction. So they have that restriction in place already. But right now, we're hovering below that threshold, and we seem to be doing okay. It's certainly it's certainly an issue for the landowners and their investors to get this phase two infrastructure done, because they don't want to be in a situation where there's not enough water to serve these houses that they're building. And if people can't build houses and occupy them, they're not going to buy the land to begin with. So that's kind of, we're in that that threshold of time. Between now and the next 2 years, we'll have a better idea of where we're at. But they are using that water that's available to them in that phase one infrastructure, which is complete. And we expect over the next 2 years to see some activity moving forward on completing that phase two infrastructure, what eliminates that constraint.
So Steve, just to separate the availability of water generally from the constraint you're talking about, what you're saying is that the pipes that run to south of 50 and the pumps and the
Correct.
tanks that we've installed down there can only deliver so much water
Correct.
in any given time frame.
That's correct.
Okay, it's not because the lake is empty, it's just literally the system won't handle more.
Correct.
Okay.
And that's the constraints with the phase one infrastructure, which we all knew going into it.
I don't think that's what Sarah was asking, but I think you were asking, are they, if the 20% of the houses are built, is the water use right now at or below 20% of the available water?
Yeah, that was one of my questions. I mean,
Could
and I don't know
ask-
where we are in
Are we
terms of the
hitting the-
percentage of build out, but it
Could I
seems
ask
like,
Marcus Yasutaki just to
Yeah.
come up and address
Yeah.
this real quick? Thank you so much.
basically, I just want to know if we're on track with our predictions.
Good evening, Marcus Yasutaki, Environmental Water Resources Director. In terms of overall water use, and I'll just give you kind of what 2021 looks like because of where we are currently. The supplies available to the city would be roughly 29,000 acre feet. I think it's like 29,250. Our projected demands out of our contractual water that we have are probably going to fall around 19,000 acre feet. So in terms of available supplies versus demands, that in our current state is not an issue. Now, that doesn't mean the state can still come in and, mandate reductions. That hasn't been brought to our attention like it was in 2014 and 2015 and part of 2016. So the state can still come in at any time and do that. In terms of the overall demand, we can look through the numbers, but I would anticipate based on what they're currently using, they're probably 300 acre feet or less if you look at, the residential demand, because do we have close to 300 units occupied roughly? About 600 occupied, so, okay, 600 at, 0.25 acre feet, 0.35 acre feet per year, because they are, one, more water efficient, but two, a majority of the homes only have the front yard landscaping, right? So there isn't any outdoor landscaping in the backyard, which significantly can reduce an overall water use. So relative to the entire city, I mean, if we wanted to be conservative and had 500 acre feet dedicated between median landscaping, the residential needs of those units that are occupied and maybe some of the model homes. I mean, the rest of the city's 18,500, north of the freeway. So relative to the overall city demand, the water use south of Highway 50 is significantly lower compared to north of the freeway.
The per household efficiency that we expected is occurring.
That is correct.
Okay.
And it's probably even safe to say it's probably even a little better than what we expected back in 2015.
Excellent. Okay, great. Any other questions? No? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marcus. Thank you, Steve and Pam, very much. Okay, consent calendar.
Okay, that takes us to tonight's consent calendar, and just as a reminder, item 13 has been amended.
And I would like to pull item 9.
Okay, any others that would like to be withdrawn for the moment? Okay, I'll
I'll move.
entertain a motion for items 5 through 14, absent number 9.
I will move.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second.
Council members Aquino?
Yes.
Chalem Chella?
Yes.
Howell?
Yes.
Rodriguez?
Yes.
And Kozlowski.
Yes.
Okay, item number 9 is resolution number 10614, a resolution authorizing increased compensation in the amount of $20,920 to Romo Studios LLC for the casting of Cash is Pick number 1 for the Johnny Cash Trail Art Experience.
And I already spoke to Lorraine about this earlier today. The reason for my pulling this has to do with the fact that we are using Core 10, which is that metal that many people believe rusts initially and then stops rusting. It does not stop rusting. Dave is shaking his head, probably feeling like alls are going into his ears, but I have a thing about Core 10 because one, it does not stop corroding, it continues to corrode so long as there's water, and it makes a mess of the concrete, just as it has on the pedestrian overcrossing. So there must be a coating put on any concrete that is going to be constructed anywhere near the Core 10 so that it does not stain like the pedestrian overcrossing did. So that's, and if you want to have the landscape architect call me, that's great. But I will go out there and coat it myself if need be.
Councilmember Howell, we won't ask you to personally code it, but we will make sure the landscape architect is aware of your concerns and get
Right,
that
and
coating
I
in
will
there.
even, as I did before, I made recommendations for what coatings should have been used. So Dave, unfortunately, is the one that's been hearing about it when this really should have been Robert's issue. So, but I'll find that the
Dave
recommended
has said he's
coating-
going to personally code it.
I'll help you, Dave.
Since you pulled the item, I think it's worth pointing out, in light of our budget and our parks discussion, that no taxpayer dollars are being used to fund this Johnny Cash art project. This is privately funded.
This is all through private donations.
Yes.
This is not general fund dollars.
Yes,
Thank
and,
you.
and with that, I will move the item.
I'll second.
Okay.
Okay, we have a motion and a second.
Council members Aquino?
Yes.
Chalem Chella?
Yes.
Howell?
Yes.
Rodriguez?
Yes.
And Kozlowski.
Yes.
Okay, your last item this evening is old business item number 15. This is Sacramento Regional Transit Annexation Update.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Dave Nugent, Public Works Director. The item before you tonight, I just want to make sure everybody knows is a presentation. There will be items within the presentation that we will return to council with appropriate resolutions to move those items forward. So with us tonight are members from SAC-RT. James Boyle will be coming down. He is the Director of Planning, and Brent Berniger, the VP CFO, is also here to answer questions, along with a number of other people. I'm sure they're either on the line or here in person. So with that, I will turn it over to James. Or backwards. Or you can use that.
All right, thank you so much. Okay. Good evening, everybody.
Welcome.
Thank you for having me, Mr. Chair, I assume, members of the council. James Boyle, I'm the Director of Planning for Sacramento Regional Transit District. And Brent was already introduced, but I also have with me Carmen Alba. She's our VP of Bus Operations. So you got a good team here tonight to present and also answer any questions or address comments you may have. So tonight I'm here to give you an update about the annexation and how things are going with regional transit and the relationship with Folsom. And so I'm excited to talk to you about a lot of positive things and changes that have been happening over the past year. So what I want to do is quickly talk to you a little bit about COVID-19 and the impacts and what it's meant to SAC-RT. There's no question that it's been a very difficult year for all of us, and the transit industries have been hit really hard in terms of ridership. But at SAC-RT, we've been very fortunate. We planned ahead with our route restructuring, which really kind of helped us in terms of serving the community and keeping ridership going. But we've also been very aware and cognizant of the safety of our passengers and of our operators. So we've done numerous things here, as you can see, in terms of fogging our buses and fogging our trains. We've been offering free rides for vaccination appointments to citizens and to our employees. We've done a lot of community outreach. We provide masks to folks. It's basically a mandatory masking, so you have to wear a mask to ride our trains or buses. We've also informed our riders and the general public through our Informacast and safety bulletins and social media posts and Alert SAC-RT. And we have very closely been following the mandates from the state, from the county, so all safety precautions and guidelines we've been following and keeping our service operating. And so it's been a tough year, and at the onset of COVID-19, we did cut back our service somewhat, but we reinstated our service quickly, actually. And so ridership has been trending back upwards now, so we're beginning to see a little, people coming back, feeling safe. So that's a positive thing for us, for Folsom, and for the community in the whole. So I just want to do a quick update, look at some of our reviews and what's happened previously. Folsom annexed into SAC-RT back in January of 19. And then in January of 2020, we added our Smart Ride on-demand transit service to Folsom. So Folsom now has Smart Ride. And in November, we expanded our Dollar Ride service area to include Folsom Ranch. We recognize that that is a up-and-coming community and a very big part of Folsom in the future, so we expanded service there. And in April, we expanded our Smart Ride to also include Folsom Ranch. So again, a new service option for Folsom Ranch. And then tonight, we're going to talk a little bit more detail about our transition and how things are going to change coming up in the future with Dollar Ride, what that means for Smart Ride, and also our paratransit service, SAC-RT Go. So here's a map of our current service area, and what this shows you is it's our expanded ADA accessible service area. So folks in Folsom now have far greater access in terms of paratransit and ADA service. You can see all the routes are buffered by a 3/4 mile buffer. So anywhere where we have fixed route operations, paratransit ADA service is complementary to our fixed route service. And we have service that extends to the Sacramento International Airport. We have service that also extends out to the Davis campus in Yolo County. And starting in June, we're going to be expanding to Elk Grove. So you can see it's growing, and that's giving residents of Folsom better access to the community. And again, we serve Citrus Heights, we serve Rancho Cordova, so a very large service area, as you can see. This slide just really highlights for you the Smart Ride options. And so you can see the zone is quite large. It covers all of Folsom. And so our Smart Ride service has actually been very successful. And even through the pandemic, we've seen ridership increase on Smart Ride. So initially there was a dip, but we have gone back the other direction now. And so in Folsom, it's no different. Smart Ride has become increasingly popular in Folsom. And it's an on-demand service, so you download an app on your phone, and you can basically hail a ride like you would with Uber or Lyft. So the same fare that we charge for the bus or train. So it's a very popular service, and we were really at the forefront and transit agencies to offer this type of service on such a large scale. So what I want to do now is transition a little bit to talk about SAC-RT Go, our paratransit service, and our Dollar Ride service, and kind of some of the changes that we're going to see, or I'll talk about. So the next couple of slides are going to really highlight for you details about how we're going to transition ourselves from Dollar Ride to Smart Ride and our SAC-RT Go services. So this first slide you'll see we talk about service hours. So these are the hours of operations for the service. Currently, the Dollar Ride is to the left of the slide here, and it's a Monday through Friday service, and you can see the service hours there start at 5:25 in the morning and run till 7:25 in the evening. There's no Saturday service, Sunday service, or holiday services. Our Smart Ride currently, the service hours are 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., but you can also see it mirrors the no weekend service and no holiday service for now. SAC-RT Go, you can see a dramatic change in this hours or span of service. So we have rides that are offered starting at 3:30 in the morning. So that's when our first fixed route service begins. So it mirrors or complements that fixed route service. So you're looking at service hours of 3:30 a.m. to 11:30 p.m., Monday through Friday. And again, on Saturday, Sunday, and holidays, you can see the service hours it's a very long span of service. So again, lots of access to the residents of Folsom who will utilize SAC-RT Go paratransit service. And then our SAC-RT Go non-ADA basically mirrors the same. The service hours are a little bit longer on Saturday, Sunday, and holidays as well. So this slide, we talk about fares. And so again, Dollar Ride, the existing daily fare for Dollar Ride is $4, and the monthly pass is $95. With Smart Ride, you're looking at a $2.50 basic fare, and then seniors age 62 and over, the fare is $1.25, and then also $1.25 for ADA customers, and any trips with 5 or more passengers together as a group, they all ride for free. So we really try to encourage group trips on microtransit, so that's one way that we do it. Smart Ride, the monthly pass is $100. It's $50 for ADA customers, and then also for seniors 62 and over, and then $40 for the monthly pass for what we call our super seniors ages 75 and over. So SAC-RT Go, The daily fare is $5 a trip. So you can see it's $1 more, but again, you have to think about that access now is system-wide. So that's a really good plus there. And then the monthly pass is $137.50, and that is for 60 ADA trips. So they can use up to 60 ADA trips, and that really equates to about $2.30 a ride. And then with that, you also get access to our fixed route service and smart ride service for free. So that is the SAC-RT Go service. And then with the non-ADA, it's also a $5 fare. So we'll talk a little bit about eligibility. With Dial-A-Ride as it exists today, the eligibility is 55 years and over. With Smart Ride, anyone is eligible. So students, citizens, senior citizens, everyone's eligible for Smart Ride. SAC-RT Go, ADA paratransit service, you have to be qualified. So a person would have to go through our process and be qualified to use paratransit. The same thing goes for our SAC Go non-ADA service. But it's also important, and I want to point out that all current Dial-A-Ride users here in Folsom will be grandfathered into the SAC-RT Go ADA paratransit service. So reservations, this is basically how people reserve trips or book trips. You can see the Dial-A-Ride is very traditional. You call in the phone number a day or two ahead and reserve your trip. Smart Ride, you can also still have the option to call, or you can also pull out your smartphone and go into the app and book your trip immediately. And then SAC-RT Go, there's a couple of different options for the ADA paratransit service. You can, again, call on a phone and go through the prompted options. And we are also testing beta apps to use on SAC-RT Go. So we're now going to try to introduce apps into the paratransit service. So SAC-RT Go ADA and non-ADA, we're beta testing an app. And then you can also go onto the website, which we're beta testing this as well. So people will have access on the web to go into their portals to book or reserve trips on ADA. So eligibility, I just want to highlight quickly, the eligibility requirements. Again, it's all customers who currently ride Dial-A-Ride in Folsom will be grandfathered into SAC-RT Go services, and they will be eligible for paratransit rides. And it's important to remember that SAC-RT Go provides ADA service in place of Dial-A-Ride, and Smart Ride is an enhancement to the service. So we're adding more service to Folsom as well. And then you can also request your ride 2 days in advance with SAC-RT Go paratransit services, or you can ride immediately with Smart Ride. So you really have a couple of different options. So I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the outreach we've done with the citizens of Folsom. We have a task force that was created. It's called the Folsom Transition Task Force, and this task force is made up of current riders or citizens within Folsom. So we met with the task force on April 22nd via Zoom call, and I wanted to just highlight quickly some of the concerns and things that we heard from the group. Obviously, there's a concern of Dial-A-Ride going away. So, we did hear about the changes to Dial-A-Ride, a little bit of apprehension to that, and we fully, understand and can relate, when things change, it's tough. But, we also heard maybe some concerns about wait times on existing Smart Ride. So with our Smart Ride service, we have it set up in such a way that if the wait times are greater than 45 minutes, it will not let you book a trip. So that's one of the concerns that we had as well. But I want to point out that we also heard a lot of great compliments from the task force. A lot of folks are very complimentary of the work that RT has done the past 2 years. They recognize the effort that staff has put into the transitions and making a smooth transition for RT, for Folsom, and also for the riders of the system. SAC-RT staff met with city staff on April 23rd to also talk about the proposed changes. And SAC-RT staff, along with our GM, Henry Lee, met with some concerned citizens on April 27th to, again, hear their concerns and work towards maybe addressing or finding a resolution to some of their concerns. So with that, I want to just highlight, some of the positives here. You know, the positives for Folsom and for residents of Folsom include, you know, additional service on Smart Ride and SAC-RT Go expanding to include the entire service area that RT offers. This gives citizens greater access to the region, again, to the airport, all the way out to Davis. And you have longer spans of service. So it goes back to those 3:30 in the morning to, you know, 11 o'clock, 1 o'clock in the morning trips. And we will also be adding a vehicle in service to our Smart Ride. So we're going to add another vehicle to account for some of those longer those wait times, so we can bring that down. And I do want to point out, I think our average wait time on Smart Ride is 10 to 12 minutes. So you will sometimes get the pop-up that the wait times exceed the limit, but on average, and Carmen may correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's 10 to 12 minutes. And then, so the other thing that I want to talk about a little bit and kind of bring to your attention is branding. So, you know, with changes like this and, you know, expansion into the entire service area, we'll talk a little bit about branding and what that looks like and kind of what that means. So for us, it's important to remember that in a system, like a transit system, branding is important because you want to create this cohesive regional look so that everyone knows that this is a transit vehicle and, you know, it's for us to ride. And it really indicates that it's one connected system and not
You
kind
can,
of...
you can just use the Folsom wrap on all of the equipment.
I know.
It's much prettier than anything else you're going to propose.
I thought you would like that picture.
It's the Folsom sales tax
I will show you
express.
tonight. So this is not anything, you know, that's permanent, but it just kind of gives you an idea of some of the things that we're thinking about. And this is an item that we'll be working through with staff, and we'll come back at a later date. But just kind of wanted to, you know, put it in front of you so that we can have a discussion and maybe get some early feedback. So I'll talk a little bit about now service improvements overall and what's going on with SAC-RT and the work that we're doing. So starting July 1st, we will, Elk Grove will be annexed into the district. So just the same as Folsom is in Citrus Heights, now Elk Grove will become part of SAC-RT district. And we will begin Smart Ride service in Elk Grove starting in the summer of 2021. So again, more expansion, more access to our system. And then here in Folsom, we are looking at all of the routes, and we've made some scheduling adjustments to, you know, make better on-time performance and more reliability. So we'll be seeing some schedule updates, maybe with Route 10 coming up soon. So we're constantly monitoring our routes to, you know, check the schedules, to look at on-time performance and where we can make improvements in the system to make it more reliable. And then there's a whole bunch of other things here. I just wanted to quickly highlight some things with you. Light rail, there's a lot going on with our light rail system. A lot of great positive things are occurring with light rail. And so the 15-minute light rail Folsom service is moving ahead. We're looking at, it's in design now, so we're looking at revenue service starting in the summer of 2023. So we're only talking a couple of years away before that 15-minute service is here in Folsom. And then a part of that comes with that, we're also modernizing our entire system. So we're getting all new cars. All the stations are going to be upgraded to low floor, so people can easily roll on and roll off, and there's no more high platform and all of that loading issues. And then, again, we're procuring new light rail cars. So the plan is really to kind of merge all these together and do some big launch in the summer of 2023 with the new 15-minute service and also with the new light rail cars. And then to pay for all this, we've been very fortunate this year. Even though we had COVID, we received a great deal of grant funding. We got grants from our federal partners, from state partners, and local partners, and we've gotten over $220 million in grant funding to pay for the conversion of our light rail system, to modernize it, to bring it up to today's standards. And we also, again, have gotten money for bus vehicle replacement, and that includes Folsom. So we got money for 2 new cutaways and also 6 buses for the Folsom bus fleet. So a lot of positives coming out of our grant awards that benefit all of us. And then planning updates, there's a lot going on the planning side. So you may see me again come back sometime in the future if I'm invited. But we're working currently now on updating our short-range transit plan. And that's basically a 5-year vision for service improvements within the district, which will include Folsom. So we'll be doing some public outreach on that. And then we will begin later this year updating our long-range transit plan, and this is a 20 to 30-year vision. So again, that's a much bigger long-range plan, but we're going to be starting that this year as well. And we're also working on a zero-emission fleet transition plan. So I'm sure you know we're all transitioning to zero-emission vehicles. Transit agencies right up there, state mandates that all of our fleets have to be zero-emission vehicle by 2040. So we're currently working on our plan now. We've already procured some zero-emission vehicles, so we're already moving in that direction. But this year, we're going to be putting together a fleet transition plan and kind of looking at how we transition all the vehicles out, where do we store them, where do we charge them, so it's a big undertaking. But that really, in a nutshell, it's a lot of stuff. And then next steps, we will come back to the council to seek approval on some of the changes that we talked about tonight in terms of dollar ride service and in terms of branding. And then we will go back and also present the changes to Dollar Ride, Smart Ride, and SAC-RT Go to our Mobility Advisory Council. So we have a council that we run these things through for advice and consent. And then, so the last day of Folsom Dollar Ride service, we're proposing to be on Friday, August 27th. And then, so those who use Dollar Ride can again transition to SAC-RT Go, or they can begin to use Smart Ride as well. But they will need to book their trips 2 days in advance of that 27th date. So as you can see, there's a lot of great positive things happening, a lot of changes, but good changes for Folsom, for RT, and for the region as a whole. So again, that's my presentation, and we're here to answer questions. I can try to answer them. I have Carmen and I have Brent. So we're here for your questions or comments.
James, thank you very much. This is great, really exciting.
Thank you.
Sarah, any comments or questions?
I just want to make sure I understand. So SAC-RT Go, is that door-to-door service, meaning you would pick me up at my home, you take me to my doctor's office, and you bring me back home?
Yes.
Okay. And then the Smart Ride, that is not door-to-door, you have fixed stops.
So Smart Ride is more curb to curb or corner to corner.
Okay.
So it'll tell you to meet us at a corner location, and you can walk to that location.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
YK, any questions? We're going to have a public comment period in a moment, but questions now.
No, I think, no, I'm only curious if you can tell us where we can go. Other than the project funding, you got $220 million for all the upgrades and all those for the light rail. Is your annual budget a revenue and expenditure? How are you guys doing? I know your CFO is here in general, right? In general.
Well, I could answer that, but I think Brent would probably have a better answer. So
just to get a feel of it, right?
Sure.
You guys are doing a great service,
Yeah,
but
thank
on
you.
the same time, it has some cost, right?
Yep, no, I appreciate the question. I think, our budget's about $212 million as an operating budget. We have $17 million in a cash reserve right now. We built up about $13 million of working capital, which is surplus that we've kind of socked aside for cash flow purposes. This year, we're doing really good with our budget to actuals. We're projecting to have a surplus this year. Part of that is, obviously we've been fortunate to get some funding from the federal government. There's 3 stimulus packages out there. There's the CARES funding, which we've received about $95 million was allocated to RT. We spent close to $50 million of it this year. We're trying to save as much as we can and spread it over as many years as we can. I can see us continuing to spend some of the CARES money into next fiscal year, and then we have 2 other federal stimulus that will help us in the next year. So from a fiscal standpoint, we're doing very strong. When we bring on new annexations, whether it's the city of Folsom, when we brought them on, and we also looked at Elk Grove, we look at their revenues and expenses, and we make sure that we look over a 5-year period, and it's at least a net neutral or greater. So from a planning standpoint, although we would always like more money, from an operating side, we've really fixed ourselves. We've controlled costs. Our CEO, along with our labor relations and our team, have done an excellent job of controlling our labor costs and keeping it to around 3%, similar to inflation. So that's been really good. We've also kind of controlled our contract costs. We brought paratransit services, the Sacratigo in-house, which allows us to kind of better manage those costs as well. Whereas when you outsource it, sometimes you can lose a little bit of that ability to control costs. I can think of a lot of other contracts that I've negotiated in with where we've been able to save money. We've also done a lot of property sales over the last couple years. So I have about close to $6 million of surplus sales in capital reserves, so we can do continued bus maintenance expansions, because with all this service, we're going to need more buses and facilities. So I can keep going on. I'm trying to just give you an idea. I think maybe just to give you some ideas too, when we talk about our needs operationally, we've been doing well, but the long-term needs of RT, we're really trying to update our needs, whether it's light rail cars. So James mentioned that we got the $220 million, and it sounds like a lot of money, but if you look at that, the construction of that line is probably around $150 to $160 million to do that line. Each light rail car is about $5.5 million. And we try to run a 4-car consist along the gold line and the blue line. So you can kind of add that up. We have, 97 light rail cars. And so you can kind of get a picture. Our capital needs is where we're really seeing a strong need in the future for, to get some more influx in. But operationally, we're doing strong.
Good, thank you. Thank you so
Hope that
much.
answered it.
We'll get all those
Thank you.
zero-emission vehicles.
Yeah, I could keep going, but I didn't want to.
We already had one budget presentation tonight.
Yeah.
Thank you.
My only other one is quick one though. 15 minutes Folsom service. It is from outlet malls to somewhere at S Street. How is that 15 minutes Folsom service?
So the double.
It's from the historic district station.
Yeah, it's from historic Folsom to Sunrise, because right now we offer a 15-minute service from basically downtown to Sunrise Station. But then it's single track, so we can't run, trains can't pass each other. So that's why we have 30-minute service to Folsom. But with this project, what we're doing is adding siding or passing at Glen Station. So a train can pull over and wait at Glen while the other passing train goes through. So that's how we're able to offer the 15-minute service.
So we're gonna start out with one passing lane, because we have funding for that, and then if we get more funding, we'll do another passing lane, which will allow more accurate timetables and so forth for the service.
Got it. Thank you.
Excellent.
I was so excited to tell my wife you can get at the outlets and go to the Capitol in 15 minutes.
It's coming. It's coming.
No, that's not what it means.
No, yeah.
Call Smart Ride.
But it's nice to be able to drive into a park and ride and not have to wait, 25 minutes. You could just wait, less than 15, which is going to be nice for our riders.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, it makes a big difference.
That's great. Rosario, any questions?
No questions.
Okay. Carrie, would you like to add something to this?
No, just once again, great work. RT staff is working very, very hard. And I think that Elk Grove, once they move forward with their annexation, is going to be as happy as we have been with how smoothly it's gone here.
Yeah. Very, very, very pleased with all of this. We do have some public comment on this topic, so we want to call those folks up to speak.
Okay. Thank you.
Your first request to speak tonight is from Margie Donovan, and Margie has provided handout in advance of the council meeting that was at your seats this evening. And then Margie will be followed by Mike Barnbaum.
Great. Thank you. Right, and sit. Good evening, council members. I'm Margie Donovan. I'm a resident of the city of Folsom. I am a Dial-A-Ride user. I want to talk about SAC-RT Goes and Dial-A-Ride. Regarding the fixed route transit in the Smart Ride system, that'll work beautifully in this town, I can guarantee you. I have an email from Henry where I addressed, after our meeting last week, which had 4 people. I want you to know that. I am the only person that uses Dial-A-Ride on a regular basis. One was just an interested citizen, the other one uses light rail occasionally, and the other one used to be a Dial-A-Ride driver until he got a car. Dial-A-Ride doesn't just serve people over 55. I was under 55 when I moved to the city. I'm an ADA eligible paratransit rider, or smart RT Go, or whatever it's called now. And there are some huge changes that's going to be a negative impact. The first thing I want to say is we don't have people turning out at these meetings, our ridership for Dial-A-Ride, because of COVID. There's no way to get the message to them. I hope that this council will seriously consider postponing the transfer of Dial-A-Ride until we can get more feedback from the ridership that normally rides. Secondly, the big concern I have, and I talked to FTA today about it, and I'm 100% correct. I finally found that out, on this area anyway. The RT has a rule, and I'm going to say paratransit is a generic service, okay? RT has a rule that once you, let me say I schedule a 2 o'clock pickup. I cannot schedule my pickup from my destination until 90 minutes later. That's significant to me. I don't live very far from much in this town. I moved up, I live actually right behind Sprouts now. And I moved up to this part of town so I could walk to most things. Now, I have other disabilities that are hidden disabilities that make me paratransit eligible. It's not just my sight loss. If I need to go to Trader Joe's, that means I'm going to Trader Joe's. It usually takes me about 20 minutes because I get to go, they help me shop there. And I'm usually done. I always schedule a 30-minute window there. That means I'm going to have to wait another hour. I go over to Creekside, 1561 Creekside to get allergy shots. Takes 10 to 15 minutes. I schedule 30 minutes. I know how to work with these systems, so I'm not making them late. I'd rather wait. Now I have to wait an extra hour over there. I am very concerned about this. Now, when I checked with FTA today, then I was able to, through the help of a sighted person, look up some of our schedules. Paratransit cannot do two things. They cannot take any additional time to get me to my destination than it would take on fixed route. They cannot make me stay at my destination any longer than it would take me to get a fixed route bus home. But globally, we're looking at 90 minutes. I can guarantee you with me, that will be an FTA filing down the road because almost everything I do in this city, it does not take an hour and a half, unless I'm going to Kohl's to go shopping or something, you know, where we really want to find time. But I have medical appointments twice a week at Dr. Benevento's office, and it's a 20, 30-minute appointment, and I'm back on Dial-A-Ride. Means I gotta wait another hour. A lot of these destinations, I mean, if I'm at a doctor's office, great, I can wait inside. A lot of these destinations do not have benches outside. I was the one that worked with Ernie to get a chair put out front here, so when people had to come and pick up their new monthly pass here. There's a lot of destinations like Dr. Benevento's doesn't have a chair outside, and they close at noon, or 12:30 to 2. That means I'm gonna have to stand outside. That's not acceptable with one of my disabilities that I have. Our drivers have gone above and beyond, and like they will help us carry grocery bags. I can take 3 grocery bags. That's the limit. I believe that's still the limit on SAC-RT Goes, is 3 grocery bags. I cannot physically carry 3 grocery bags due to one of my other disabilities. These are the things I hope that you guys will seriously consider before passing this and allowing SAC-RT to come in and take over Dial-A-Ride. And the most important part is we need the input from more of our ridership. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Where are you? Thank you. Oh, and I forgot to say, the document I provided you with, I'm so sorry, I forgot to say this, is a bill that's going through Congress right now that is really looking at upgrading paratransit as a whole, and this, to me, is a step backwards. Thank you.
Gotcha. Maybe it would be a, can I ask for a response on the delay in the middle of a round trip?
Absolutely.
Okay, James, could you address that particular topic and how that works exactly? Or, I'm sorry, yeah, Carmen, thank you.
Hi, good evening, Carmen Alba. Yes, I can address that. So when we took this service over from Paratransit Inc. last fall, we left a lot of the policies in place. We felt that was a smoother transition. One of those guidelines was a 90-minute wait between trips. And the reason for that is because it allows, PI currently has a 1 minute to 30-minute window. In other words, if you have an 8 o'clock appointment, I can pick you up between 8 and 8:30. So let's say we picked you up at 8:30 for that. We allowed, or there was an allowance of 30 minutes for travel time. So that brings you to 1 hour. And then they allowed an additional 30 minutes for you to conduct your business or be at your doctor's appointment. That's how we got to the 1 hour and 30-minute, the 90-minute guideline.
Gotcha.
After some, so technically, if we didn't have that guideline in place, we can technically drop you off and say, well, wait a minute, it's time for your return ride now. The ADA does not allow us to leave a person. We have to take them home after the second leg has to be performed. So let's say that you're late for your doctor's appointment. That's a no-show, so it's just a technical no-show. The bus needs to go on. The dispatcher needs to go pick up that person. So no one will ever be left behind. There are, without getting too technical, there are procedures in place, like a will call. We'll place them on a will call. All these are just behind the scenes technical terms so that we can get people to their destination. So we've had a few conversations with Ms. Donovan, and in fact, we spoke this morning. One of the things that I relayed is that we are open to some of these improvements, and we can put those in place right away. We would like to go back to our MAC and change some of these policies. I'll give you another example. Here at Folsom, the dial-a-ride has a 15-minute before and a 15-minute after pickup window. So if I have an 8 o'clock appointment, I can be picked up at 7:45 or 8:15. That would be a change over at SAC-RT Go. It's 1 minute to 30. I hope I'm not losing anybody here, but I think this is really important.
It's a confluence of these windows overlapping.
Yes.
I get that part, yeah.
If we were to change that, EVAN over at Elk Grove also has a 15-minute before, 15 after, just like a lot of transit agencies do. If we were to change that window to make it consistent and change SAC-RT Go, we can also reduce that window to maybe 60 minutes or even 30 minutes. In a community like Folsom, where you can get somewhere a lot faster, we can certainly do that. We are flexible. Our goal here is to serve people. I started my career as a paratransit operations manager, so I very much understand who our passengers are. I hope that answers or responds.
It raises a bit of curiosity on my part. The actual vehicles that are doing these pickups and drop-offs, are there a lot of them? Are they circulating in Folsom frequently? Is there one that kind of is always nearby, or?
We have several vehicles. So for Go, we do have several vehicles across the whole region for SAC-RT Go. A lot of them pull out of the Hazel yard here. For Smart Ride, we also have a dedicated fleet. I think we have 3 full-time, 3.5, so 3 full-time runs and 1 part-time run. We're going to add additional resources with this change to our Smart Ride to ensure that there's plenty of capacity.
And there is almost always a dial-a-ride vehicle in the Walmart parking lot.
Really? So it sounds like as you add some vehicles, you'll get a little more flexibility to tighten up those windows and
Yes.
perhaps, at least in part, address Ms. Donovan's commentary.
Yes,
Okay.
we have a plan to address that.
Excellent. Okay,
Yes.
great.
And then if I could just add one comment, because she brought
Yeah.
up some great points.
Yeah.
I think just to kind of keep these in perspective, some numbers we got on the March ridership is what we've been kind of we always track ridership, obviously. We have ridership counts, and we look at them very closely. You'll actually see since we launched Dial-A-Ride and then microtransit, you'll see that the population of riders has shifted. So in March, there was 1,041 trips on the microtransit and only 421 on Dial-A-Ride. And so obviously when we didn't have microtransit, everyone was doing Dial-A-Ride. And so what you've seen is like 70% of those riders now have shifted over because everybody wants on-demand service. You pick up your phone, you want to go somewhere. It's very rare that people are calling in advance, but there are some people that do that, and we have to respect that, and we think that's where the SAC-RT Go the combination of SAC-RT Go with the Dial-A-Ride, we think can meet that.
Okay, all right. Sounds like we're heading in the right direction at least. hopefully. All right, we have
Thank
another
you.
public comment.
Yep, your next speaker is Mike Barnbaum.
Welcome, sir.
Welcome. Thank you again. So I want to piggyback on the presentation and begin it this way. So on that last slide that talked about the transition at the end of August and why dates are picked the way they're picked. So as a frequent rider of RT, one of the things that frequent riders learn are from the operators of bus and light rail. Each bus and light rail operator is a member of what's called the Amalgamated Transit Union, Local 256, and they bid for work 4 times per year. Typically in RT circles, that's come to January, April, June, and September. With adjustments around holidays, the sign-up period, as it might be called, might be adjusted a week before or a week after. And that happened in 2019 with SAC-RT Forward. The original date before it was finalized was going to be Labor Day weekend, and that was actually moved to the following weekend so as to not have a holiday conflict with the network change that occurred with SAC-RT Forward in September 2019. Recently with COVID in August of last year and coming up this year, the change around the date you saw is going to be that Sunday at the very tail end of August, because it became known that that is not Labor Day weekend, and it was the rare 5th Sunday of the month, both last year and this year. The other thing I wanted to piggyback on is, as many of you know, I love transportation planning, the marketing, and delivering route and schedule information. So with that note, as you saw in one slide, there's in the works a short-range transit plan. And so you heard probably some ideas about Route 10, in 2 years, the 15-minute frequency of the light rail, which wanted to address that. So it's not like it's going to take 15 minutes to get someplace, but what that refers to is when one train leaves, another one is going to leave from the same station in the same direction 15 minutes later. One of the benefits you have in this region is here in Folsom and on the Gold Line, you can literally get on a train at the historic Folsom station and make a trip to Jack London Square or Derridon Station in San Jose with one transfer at the Sacramento Valley Station to a Capital Corridor train. And that's how real simple and easy it's been here in the Northern California mega region to make trips like that. So I look forward to working with the team and you and everybody in developing a great short-range transit plan and working on some of the transitions presented in the meeting and presentation this evening.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
All right, any other public comment?
You have no further requests to speak this evening.
Okay, any city council members like to comment further?
No, just thanks to the RT staff for the update.
Hear, hear. Very good, thank you. All right, let's move on.
Takes us to city manager reports.
All right, thank you. The City of Folsom is celebrating its 75th anniversary. The occasion marks a special opportunity to honor the past, celebrate the present, and look ahead to the future. The city is proud to celebrate Folsom's history, and you can visit folsom.ca.us/75 years to take a visual tour through our history. Join your friends and neighbors to submit a photo to be part of a photo mosaic. Download our free printable 75th anniversary scavenger hunt. Download Zoom backgrounds and submit Folsom-inspired songs for our playlist. And you can pick up posters and pins right here in the back of the room and also in City Hall at your leisure. Wanted to let you know that the City of Folsom Environmental and Water Resources Department will be lowering the water levels at the Willow Hill Reservoir in May and June. City engineers will evaluate the design and construction options for an upcoming valve and pipeline repair project at the reservoir. These repairs are required by the California Department of Water Resources. So beginning in early May, you will see the water lowering, and then they will gradually return to normal levels in May or June. The reservoir will remain open to the public. And one final announcement that I'd like to share, if I could, and I just need to get something up on my phone. About 3 years ago, someone started something very tough and very challenging and very important, and last week they finished it. I want you all to know that I'm very pleased to share that our very own city clerk, Krista Fremantle, quietly and competently earned her Bachelor of Arts in Political Science from Southern New Hampshire University, with her last class completed just a few days ago. Krista managed earning this degree while still serving the city full-time. I am so proud of you, Krista. Congratulations, my dear friend. You are a college graduate. I hope you will wear the blue and yellow of SNHU very proudly.
Thank you.
And a school back east even.
How about that? That is fantastic.
My brother-in-law got his master's there last year. Seriously.
That is great.
But they were threatening that they were going to they have a bus that was supposed to be delivering people's diplomas. At least that's what they were saying last year. Seriously, honestly, my brother-in-law got his master's from there last year.
That's great.
That's awesome.
Except he lives within driving distance of New Hampshire.
Thank you.
Oh, Elaine, you've set the bar so high for yourself now in
This
terms
has
of
been
future
this has
city
been a
manager
very
report.
emotional thing for. I'm just so proud of Krista. She took a leap of faith and she just went for it and just quietly did it, and I'm so proud.
And she's about to cry like she's your mom.
This is a big thing.
Magnificent. Magnificent. Okay, I'm not sure how any of us can top that, but council commentary? Madam Vice Mayor? YK, anything for tonight?
Krista, congratulations. You know, it's a big thing. Thank you so much. I know this Friday we have a sanitizer distribution for businesses and the home residents. Please take advantage, Folsom, and show up. We have lots of sanitizers to distribute, especially the businesses. You guys are getting more people now. You know, keep these hand sanitizers in front of them. With that, thank you and good evening.
Very good. Rosario?
Congratulations, Krista. I just want to thank Dave Nugent for a tour of Public Works. It was actually my first time on the corpse yard, and that was a very interesting tour. I also had one with Marcus Yasutaki, and Marcus could actually start a podcast and talk about water and Folsom because there are so many questions and it was so informative. And I really wish that the public could hear all of the just the amazing information that comes out of the from his department.
You just have a thing for engineers.
I do. Because they're so technical and they're so neat to talk to, and there's so much good information, and they're very detailed. I also want to thank 12 volunteers, YK and myself, who helped search clean up the Folsom camp behind the police department. One of the volunteers is an unhoused member of Folsom, and so it was great to have him be a part of that. In the last meeting, I shared a little bit about the Folsom, this homeless task force. We don't have a name yet, but it's just bringing people together who are very interested in helping deal with the homeless issue and what we can do to make improvements. And we had a really good outcome at this last meeting with Jake Sterney's home, Heart of Folsom, Sergeant Zavala, who just brings a wealth of information, Sacramento Self-Help Housing. We had the Folsom Navigator and her supervisor, 3 very active Folsom residents, the behavioral health supervisor, and myself. And what we did is looked at what are the problems that we are trying to solve, short-term goals, long-term goals, and a wish list. And so it was a really good hour and a half of information. I would also be interested in seeing some of the data of the Folsom police officer, of the police department turnover. You know, as a business owner, turnover is really one of the things that is probably the most concerning. And so when we look at the police department and we look at, I'd be interested to see, is there a balance? You know, my family was affected by a situation that happened. I have a cousin who was killed by the Folsom Police Department. He was an honor roll student. He was a criminal justice major. He had no prior criminal record. He was committed to helping young youth stay out of drugs and gangs in San Francisco, and in a very unfortunate situation, he was killed. And so what it left me was thinking that having a department that is not balanced in terms of training and ensuring that we have just a good department is, if we don't, it should be a concern for residents. So I just would just be interested in the data.
We can provide that.
Can I just clarify, you said he was killed by the Folsom Police
Oh, sorry,
Department?
clarification. Sorry, San Francisco Police Department. Oh, thank you, Sarah. Yes. Yes, thank you.
Okay, Carrie.
The usual crazy drivers. I was sitting at the light to turn in, like near BJ's, to turn into that shopping center. And a full-size four-wheel drive white Ford pickup blew through the light doing probably 60. And I'm not talking about somebody that kept going when the light was yellow. This light was red long before the guy got there. Thank God nobody turned in front of this guy. There was an accident on Randall this morning at Natoma Street that I pulled up on, but it looked like it was a fairly serious one based on the amount of police and fire department that were there. That's the first one I've seen there, and I'm kind of surprised, frankly. But people just, you're not the only one on the road, and you need to pay attention, and the rules apply to you as well. You know, PD mentioned the increased enforcement, and, you know, you're either going to get a ticket, or, you know, if you thought you were going to be 5 minutes late for where you wanted to be, it's way better to be 5 minutes late than 5 hours late or never make that meeting at all. So please be aware. The weather's getting warmer. There's lots of people out walking around, and you know, people that are walking around. By the way, we have lovely sidewalks. Please use them. There's no reason for people to be walking around in the middle of the street.
Amen.
Thank you.
I agree completely. I will just say that apparently COVID is sort of drifting into our history, thank goodness, because I have been invited to appear at about 7 different things in person over the next couple of weeks to start Bike Month, several Eagle Scout Courts of Honor, a foot race that's going to happen starting here in Folsom. So there's all kinds of great stuff happening, and I am super excited that spring has sprung. So thank you all very much. With that, we are adjourned.